Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 18 of Reincarnation of the Businesswoman at School. Let's dive into the video. When Gu Ning and her friends went back to their private room and told others what they had done, the men were greatly surprised. What? Gu Ning won 100 million yuan by playing just one round on a slot machine? She is so lucky. Ling Xiaoting looked at Gu Ning with a proud smile on his lips. Gu Ning, you're so awesome. Su Jinchen said. How did you manage to do that? Qin Meng asked. I guess I was just lucky, Gu Ning said, because she couldn't tell them that she had jade eyes. They actually believed that she was lucky because people who played slot machines relied on luck to win money, but her luck was incredibly good. Ning Ning is also generous. She gives Wenqin and me 30 million yuan each. Su Qining said. Other than Ling Xiaoting, the rest were all shocked by Gu Ning's generosity again. Well, I didn't spare much effort on the money, so I shared with them, Gu Ning said airily. Why didn't you take me there too? Su Jinchen complained. And me? Si Ming echoed. Do you lack money? Ling Xiaoming asked suddenly. Su Jinchen and Si Ming were struck dumb for a second and instantly responded. No, we're just kidding. Just kidding. Of course not. They of course wouldn't admit to that, because they would be assigned tasks if they did. Although they had their own tasks, they could also take assignments on the international reward list and work like killers, but their aims were different. Killers would take assignments as long as they were paid, and didn't care who the person that they were going to kill was. They, however, only caught criminals, and their reward was lower than the killer's was. After that, they continued to chat while drinking. Chao Wenqin and Su Qining went to play Q Sports later. Ah! Suddenly, an agonized shout attracted everyone in the room's attention. They looked over and saw Xian Bei covering his waist with his hand while glaring at Chao Wenqin. Everybody immediately realized what was going on. Facing Xian Bei's glare, Chao Wenqin shrugged her shoulders. It wasn't my fault. You stood behind me. Xian Bei was furious. Chao Wenqin just hit him with her cue stick, but she refused to apologize and played innocent. Although Xian Bei was mad, he was unwilling to argue with her anymore. Therefore, he walked away. They didn't stay there for too long, and separated when it was 11 p.m. While they were walking out, Xian Bei suddenly stopped, and Chao Wenqin, who walked behind him, directly knocked into his back and her handbag fell on the ground. Chao Wenqin was mad at once. Why did you do that? It wasn't my fault. You walked behind me yourself. And it was you who knocked into my back. You don't apologize and even blame me for it? You're insane. Xian Bei said, then ignored her, walking forward in a good mood. Obviously, Xian Bei did it on purpose. Chao Wenqin was in a rage, but could do nothing. The rest of the people around them shook their heads, and didn't know what to say. The two of them had had so many conflicts just within a day. Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting drove Chao Wenqin to the hotel before they went back to their house. When Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting were alone together, Gu Ning teased, I noticed that you were very happy when Wenqin called you brother-in-law. She's your older sister, and her opinion matters. Ling Xiaoting said seriously. Gu Ning smiled, but didn't say anything. Indeed, it was a good thing to win the family's approval. OS. Ling Xiaoting had told her that he only cared about his grandpa, so Gu Ning highly valued Master Ling's opinions towards her as well. What Gu Ning didn't know yet was that Master Ling already knew about her existence, and was very satisfied. Of course, before Master Ling met Gu Ning in person, he thought highly of her just because of Ling Xiaoting and impressive stories about her. Oh, I went to the Kirin Gang's clubhouse when I was in City B. I accidentally won 100 million yuan there, and the head of the Kirin gang, Qi Tianlin, caused me some trouble, Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was worried. Did anything bad happen? He had, of course, heard of Qi Tianlin, and knew that he was cruel, cunning, and cold-blooded. Nope. He asked to have a round of gambling with me. I won in the end, and he lost 3 billion yuan. I gave Wenqin and Jiakai 500 million yuan each, Gu Ning said. He would yield that easily? Leng Xiaoting frowned with doubt. It seemed Gu Ning couldn't omit what had happened in the middle. Well, he refused to do so in the beginning, but I injured 2 of his men and cured them later. He wanted my medicine, so we made an agreement. Don't worry. He won't cause me trouble anymore. Medicine again. However, Leng Xiaoting only cared whether Qi Tianlin would try to get revenge on Gu Ning. Stay away from Qi Tianlin. He's even more dangerous than Sitiyi. Ha, do you mean I can keep in touch with Sitiyi? Gu Ning squinted her eyes. She said it on purpose to see Leng Xiaoting's reaction. Unexpectedly, Leng Xiaoting slammed on the brakes and stopped the car at the roadside all of a sudden. What? Gu Ning was scared, but her mouth was covered before she could say another word. Leng Xiaoting kissed and caught her lips tightly like he was punishing her. He didn't let her go until several minutes had passed. Seeing Gu Ning's slightly swollen lips, Leng Xiaoting felt a little bad, but didn't apologize. Instead, he announced in a domineering tone, "Stay away from Sitiyi too. You have me, and I can handle everything for you." Gu Ning was amused. She was just joking with him, but he reacted so strongly. It seemed like she couldn't tease him because he easily got jealous of other men. "All right, drive ahead now," Gu Ning said. Hearing Gu Ning's affirmative answer, Leng Xiaoting was satisfied. "Oh, I'll prepare some pills for you later and you can carry them with you. No matter if you're injured or sick, you can take them." Although Leng Xiaoting was an extremely outstanding military officer, he could be hurt too, and his tasks were always full of danger, so it was necessary for him to carry some medicines with him. "You can also send some to Grandpa. They're good for his body," Gu Ning said. Vist and Velben, CM for new updates. Sure. Leng Xiaoting didn't reject because he knew that Gu Ning did it for his own good. Although he didn't doubt the effects of her medicine, he was curious about its source. "Where do you get so much medicine?" "My master gave it to me. She gave me a lot, but I don't know where she got the pills. During my training in the past, I was always injured, so my master told me to take the pills and I recovered quickly every time," Gu Ning lied. "I think that my master might have been a highly skilled doctor too." Although it sounded strange, Leng Xiaoting accepted Gu Ning's explanation. "What are you going to do tomorrow?" Leng Xiaoting asked. "I'll go to Shangyun Antique Store tomorrow," Gu Ning said. "I'll go with you," Leng Xiaoting said. Gu Ning looked to him and blinked. "Are you free tomorrow?" "Yes." Leng Xiaoting had already finished what he had to do in order to keep Gu Ning company when she was in the capital. "Let's visit my Sihiyuan first tomorrow morning," Leng Xiaoting said. "Great!" Gu Ning was very interested in this historical type of residence. Most importantly, it was Leng Xiaoting's place. When they were back at the house, Leng Xiaoting helped Gu Ning fill the bathtub with water, and Gu Ning went to take a bath. However, when she had just undressed herself, Leng Xiaoting suddenly came into the bathroom without any clothing on. Gu Ning was astonished, then flushed, and didn't dare to look straight at him. She immediately wrapped herself with a bath towel. What are you doing here?" "Let's have a bath together," Leng Xiaoting said. He didn't feel embarrassed at all. "No. Get out now," Gu Ning said. Seeing Gu Ning flushing, Ling Xiaoting laughed. Don't you think that it's too late to be shy now? Saying that, he walked over to her and grabbed her bath towel. Gu Ning was a little mad, but didn't know what to say. He didn't allow her to say another word but pulled her into his arms. Their naked bodies rubbed against each other with great passion. Ling Xiaoting kissed Gu Ning wildly while his hands moved over her smooth body. Gu Ning enjoyed his touch a lot. She completely gave up and let him do whatever he wanted. When dawn broke the next day, Ling Xiaoting opened his eyes. Seeing his girl sleeping quietly in his arms, he felt deeply in love. It was so nice to have her by his side. Ling Xiaoting had thought that he might die alone. However, ever since he had met Gu Ning, his heart had skipped a beat and now he was deeply in love with her. After staring at Gu Ning for a while, Ling Xiaoting reluctantly left the bed. He was going to prepare breakfast for Gu Ning. While he was moving Gu Ning back to the bed, Gu Ning woke up. Xiaoting, she called him when she was still half awake. Morning, baby. Did I wake you up? Ling Xiaoting put her arm which was exposed to the air into the quilt, then lowered his voice. It's still early. You can sleep for a while longer. Gu Ning answered softly then went back to sound sleep. With Ling Xiaoting by her side, she felt so safe that she easily fell into a sound sleep. In addition, she was really exhausted after what they had done last night. Ling Xiaoting wore a gentle and loving smile when he saw Gu Ning falling asleep again then walked out. After he prepared breakfast, he walked back to the room. At this time, Gu Ning was completely awake. Breakfast is ready, Ling Xiaoting said. Thanks, Gu Ning said and sat up. When she saw that she was still naked with many hickeys, her face turned pure red and she immediately pulled the quilt up to cover herself. Get out! Ling Xiaoting laughed happily before he walked out. Oh, your clothes are in the closet. Gu Ning didn't leave the bed until Ling Xiaoting was gone. She opened the closet and saw a row of new clothing, which was all hers. However, when she noticed female underwear, she flushed again. Did he buy all of this? Or did he ask someone else to buy them? Didn't he feel awkward? Gu Ning was completely shocked when she found out that the underwear fit her really well. It took her a long time to put the clothing on and leave the bedroom. Ling Xiaoting was quite satisfied when he saw that Gu Ning was wearing the clothes that he had prepared for her. Gu Ning, on the other hand, didn't give him a glance at all, but sat at the table and directly ate breakfast. Ling Xiaoting understood that she was shy but he deliberately brought it up. Does it fit? Gu Ning answered lightly, then remained quiet. Ling Xiaoting also stopped teasing her. After breakfast, Gu Ning called Chao Wenxin and invited her to hang out with them. Hearing that, Ling Xiaoting was displeased. It wasn't easy for them to spend some time alone, but Gu Ning called her friend to join them. Nonetheless, it wouldn't be appropriate if Gu Ning left Chao Wenxin alone in the hotel either, so Ling Xiaoting didn't oppose it. Luckily, Chao Wenxin already had an appointment with her friend, so she wouldn't hang out with them in the morning, but she would meet them for dinner. Around 9 a.m., Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting set off. Ling Xiaoting's Sihiyuan wasn't far from the Beihai Park and was located in the downtown. It had the best location and view in the downtown. There was a large grassland at the periphery of the Sihiyuan. Pushing the front door open, there was a big yard with beautiful peach trees lined up along two sides. It was winter, so the trees weren't in bloom, but it would be breathtaking in spring. Vist and Velben, CM for new updates. 1. A Sihiyuan is a historical type of residence that was commonly found throughout China. Throughout Chinese history, the Sihiyuan composition was the basic pattern used for residences, palaces, temples, monasteries, family businesses, and government offices. It is also referred to as a Chinese quadrangle. At the left side of the yard, there was an artificial rockery with a beautiful lotus pond under it. It was winter, so there were no lotus blossoms, but a school of carp was swimming around in it. Beside the lotus pond, there was a small gazebo with a rock table and 4 rock stools in it. When the weather turned warmer, they could relax and unwind here. On both sides of the yard, there were passages in a historical style. Gu Ning immediately fell in love with the style. This was just the front yard, and there was also a backyard. They kept moving ahead, walking through the front hall to the backyard. Gu Ning's eyes lit up again when she saw the view. The backyard was so exquisite that Gu Ning was really in love with this place. "Do you like it?" Although Leng Xiaoting already knew the answer from Gu Ning's face, he still wanted to hear the answer from her mouth. "Of course I do." Gu Ning smiled with happiness. Leng Xiaoting hugged Gu Ning and said, "This place is near the capital university. When you study we can live here." Gu Ning was struck dumb for a second and rejected. "No, I'm going to buy my own house." Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was upset. "No, you're going to live here with me." "No. I don't care. I'll live wherever you live." Leng Xiaoting didn't want to argue with Gu Ning. All he wanted was to live with her. Gu Ning was amused by his childlike response, but she would make the decision when it came. Although Leng Xiaoting never stayed in the sahi when everything that was needed was in it, and it was cleaned regularly, so they could stay here whenever they wanted. "Ning Ning, do you want to rest in the room, or go grocery shopping with me?" Leng Xiaoting asked. "I'll go with you," Gu Ning said without hesitation. "Great." Leng Xiaoting then held Gu Ning's hand and drove to the supermarket. When they entered the supermarket, people around them were all stunned by their outstanding appearance. Some women even stared at Leng Xiaoting and directly ignored their own male partners. However, Leng Xiaoting didn't pay any attention to them, but instead asked Gu Ning, "What do you want to have?" "Let's have a look around first," Gu Ning said. She actually had no idea what food to buy, because she wasn't very interested in cooking. Leng Xiaoting pushed the cart while Gu Ning was looking for what she wanted. Gu Ning didn't choose a lot of food, because there were only 2 of them. After grocery shopping, Leng Xiaoting told Gu Ning to rest and that he would cook. At this time, Gu Ning received Gu Man's call. "Ning Ning! The Lantern Festival is 3 days away. When are you coming home?" Gu Man asked. Her daughter was busy every day in another city. She was worried, but could do nothing about it. "I'm busy tomorrow, but I'll be back the day after tomorrow," Gu Ning said. "You're always busy, but I can't help you with that. You must take good care of yourself. I don't care how much money you can make, your health matters the most, all right?" Gu Man said. "I understand. Mom, you also need to take good care of yourself," Gu Ning said. "Oh, did the people from the Gu family cause you trouble these past days?" Hearing that, Gu Man was quiet for a few seconds before she said, "Gu Qinxiang called me once. His company can barely stay afloat now, so he wanted to borrow some money, but I rejected him." Although Gu Qinxiang was Gu Man's older brother, what he had done had completely broken her heart, so she would never forget the past and help him. Gu Man lived an affluent life now, so they wanted to ride on their coattails. If Gu Man was as poor as in the past, they would never remember that Gu Man was their family. From what Gu Man knew about Gu Qinxiang, she understood that they wouldn't respect her even though she was rich now. Instead, they would do their best to grab her wealth away or destroy her life. "Well done. Just ignore them." Gu Ning supported Gu Man. After chatting with Gu Man for a few minutes, Gu Ning hung up the phone. Within an hour and a half, 5 dishes were placed on the table. Ling Xiaoting then called Gu Ning to dine together. Chao Wenxin and Ai Xinyu had an appointment today. And Ai Xinyu came with another female friend, Su Tonghua. Su Tonghua was very pretty and elegant. She wasn't a famous actress, but her acting skills were quite good. However, she didn't get many chances because she refused to accept the unspoken rules in the entertainment industry. And ever since she had annoyed a big boss, she had been directly shut out of the industry. Su Tonghua's major was graphic design in her college, and she had entered the entertainment industry by coincidence. Since the company she worked for was unwilling to give her any chances now, she relied on Ai Xinyu, who helped her get some jobs concerning graphic design to make a living. Ai Xinyu's family was relatively rich with a good amount of wealth, but didn't have any power, so her parents weren't able to help her get rid of the company. When the three of them had just walked into a restaurant, they noticed a robber. Without delay, Chao Wenxin ran to catch him. Although the robber ran fast, Chao Wenxin ran faster. Within seconds, Chao Wenxin successfully caught the robber and got the handbag back. The middle-aged woman who had been robbed thanked Chao Wenxin repeatedly. And since the handbag was back, the middle-aged woman didn't bother to call the police. Explore new novels on nvelbai.com. Coincidentally, Su Jinchen and Xian Bei, who were sitting by the window, saw the scene. At that moment, Xian Bei changed his bad impression of Chao Wenxin. It's surprising that Chao Wenxin is good at fighting. Su Jinchen was greatly surprised. And she's so brave. She is, but also too impulsive. Sometimes, she shouldn't dash out and get involved, Xian Bei said. Su Jinchen smiled, but didn't say anything. They're walking upstairs. Why don't we invite them to dine together? Su Jinchen said. Whatever, Xian Bei said in an unfriendly tone. I guess you really dislike her. It was just a misunderstanding, so why can't you let it go? Su Jinchen didn't understand why Xian Bei suddenly became so mean. Besides, Xian Bei had been talking and laughing with him just then. However, once Chao Wenxin appeared, Xian Bei looked so cold and serious. Fine, if you don't want to see her, I won't invite them. Let's just pretend that we don't see them when they come over later. Xian Bei frowned a little. He moved his lips, but didn't say anything. This restaurant only had a dining hall, so it was hard to pretend that they didn't see Chao Wenxin and her friend unless the two girls walked to the opposite side. However, a waiter guided Chao Wenxin and her friend walking right in their direction. What was worse, Chao Wenxin met Su Jinchen's eyes the next second, and it would be rude if Su Jinchen still said nothing. Oh, hi, Miss Chao. What a coincidence. Would you mind dining with us? Su Jinchen said politely. Chao Wenxin gave Xian Bei a glance and rejected. Thanks, Mr. Su, but we already booked a table. She directly ignored Xian Bei. After that, Chao Wenxin followed the waiter, walking to a table which was in front of Su Jinchen's. When Ai Xinyu saw Xian Bei, she was quite surprised. Wenxin, how small this world is. You know the terrible man's friend? Ai Xinyu said to Chao Wenxin. Although Ai Xinyu kept her voice low, Xian Bei and Su Jinchen still heard it. Xian Bei was displeased at once, but Su Jinchen laughed quietly. Chao Wenxin felt a little embarrassed and explained. Actually, it was just a misunderstanding. He isn't a terrible man. The woman was his girlfriend and she dumped him because he had nothing before. And now that he's successful, the woman came back to him. They're all my brother-in-law's good friends, and we dined together last night. She disliked Xian Bei, but she wouldn't damage his reputation. What? Ai Xinyu was surprised. Did you get along last night? Well, we argued for a while, Chao Wenxin said. Wenxin, I told you that you're too impulsive sometimes, and now you hurt an innocent man, Ai Sinu said. It wasn't my fault. You witnessed what happened yesterday too, and it was so easy for others to misunderstand it. Although Chao Wenxin admitted that she had mistaken Xian Bei, she didn't think it was all her fault. Su Jinchen and Xian Bei finished their meal earlier. Before they left, Su Jinchen gently said goodbye to Chao Wenxin, and his polite attitude left a great impression on the two girls. I think that this man is handsome and polite. If he's single, why don't you try getting to know him better? Ai Sinu said to Chao Wenxin. Chao Wenxin thought for a while. Su Jinchen was indeed an outstanding man no matter from what perspective, but she had no feelings towards him yet. Therefore, she decided to be patient. When Chao Wenxin and her friend finished their meal and went to pay the bill, the waiter told them that Su Jinchen had already paid for them. They were amazed. Wow! He's not only handsome and gentle but also very generous. Ai Sinu complimented. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting went to have a walk in the area around the Sihiyuan after their meal. Soon they came to Beihai Park. Do you want to take a boat on the river? Leng Xiaoting asked. Sure. Gu Ning said excitedly. Afterwards, they rented a small boat, and other than Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting, there was only a boatman on the boat. They appreciated the view along the river, while the boat moved ahead slowly. Gu Ning sat next to the boat's edge. So when she noticed a goldfish surfacing near the boat and it seemed like it was dying, she held it in her hand and put some power into it. Before long, the goldfish was alive again. Seeing that, Leng Xiaoting was surprised, but didn't say anything. Gu Ning joked, "It's a goldfish and we can't eat it, otherwise I'd bring it home and cook it." Leng Xiaoting smiled and gently rubbed Gu Ning's head. "If you want to eat fish, we can buy a fish later." Gu Ning blinked. "Aren't you allergic to seafood?" "Fish is seafood too." "I'm not allergic to fish," Leng Xiaoting said. "Nice. We can have fish this afternoon," Gu Ning said with a smile. Gu Ning's favorite food was seafood. Unfortunately, Leng Xiaoting was allergic to seafood, so she never mentioned having seafood when she was with Leng Xiaoting. After Gu Ning put the goldfish back into the water, the goldfish didn't swim away but jumped right in front of Gu Ning, like it was performing for her. In addition, Gu Ning had a strong sense that the goldfish was looking at her gratefully, which astonished Gu Ning, but she didn't say anything. Leng Xiaoting also had the same strange feeling and he was as astonished as Gu Ning, but he didn't say anything either. An idea suddenly dawned on Gu Ning, and she immediately used her jade eyes to see what was in the water. The water was murky but it became crystal clean before Gu Ning's jade eyes. There were many fish in the water along with thick aquatic plants. Right when Gu Ning was about to draw her look back, a vermilion wooden box the size of a 50-centimeter suitcase appeared in her sight. "Are there any antiques in it?" she thought to herself. Gu Ning looked inside of the wooden box, and she was right. There were many antiques in the box. Gu Ning recognized some of them, like several porcelain bottles from the Qing dynasty. All the antiques were from the palace during the Qing dynasty. Gu Ning guessed that it was possible that someone had stolen those antiques from the palace but had been discovered, so the antiques were abandoned to the river. They were sailing on the moat now, and there had been ancient palaces next to the moat. Gu Ning got excited and was caught by Leng Xiaoting. "What happened? Why are you so happy?" Leng Xiaoting asked with curiosity. Gu Ning then realized she shouldn't have shown her excitement, but she didn't panic. Oh, I just saw two fish fighting in the water." "Two fish were fighting?" Leng Xiaoting was surprised. Although Gu Ning found the antiques, she couldn't get them right now, especially when Leng Xiaoting was here. Therefore, she planned to come to the capital by herself the next time. Gu Ning wasn't in a hurry, because she didn't think that others would be able to find the wooden box. Otherwise, the wooden box wouldn't have been hidden in the water for hundreds of years. After walking around the park for an hour, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting went back to Sihiyuan and then drove to Antique Street. Once they were at the Antique Street, Gu Ning unconsciously used her jade eyes to scan the objects on the sides of the street. Surprisingly, she did find 2 real antiques, although they weren't very valuable. When they walked into Shangyun Antique Store, Gu Ning directly gave Chendarong the antiques that she had just bought, and Chendarong was surprised too. After that, Chendarong gave a report to Gu Ning about the sales in the store. Antique stores weren't busy every day, but Shangyun Antique Store was an exception. It had even sold several pieces of real antiques. The owners of other antique stores on the street were jealous, but none of them dared to cause Shangyun Antique Store any trouble, because it had Master Su and Master Zhang's support. Although Gu Ning wouldn't do everything behind Leng Xiaoting's back, sometimes she had to avoid him. For example, she couldn't show the antiques that she carried with her in front of Leng Xiaoting. Leng Xiaoting had been with Gu Ning the entire time, so he would be suspicious if she suddenly took out a lot of antiques. However, if she showed them in front of Chendarong, Chendarong wouldn't have doubt. Therefore, Gu Ning made an excuse and told Chendarong to discuss something with her in the office, while Leng Xiaoting went to wait for her in the lounge. When they were in the office, Gu Ning took several Sankai antiques out of her backpack. Chendarong rounded his eyes in shock when he saw them. Gu Ning told Chendarong to deal with the antiques, then left with Leng Xiaoting. That afternoon, Gu Ning received Ning Changkai's call. He told her that everything was prepared, and Gu Ning replied that she would go to meet him tomorrow at noon. Afterwards, Gu Ning invited Chao Wenxin to dine with them in the Sihiyuan. Leng Xiaoting was a little upset that he couldn't be alone with his girl, but he didn't say anything. When Chao Wenxin arrived at the Sihiyuan, she was totally shocked, because it was rare to see such a beautiful and grand Sihiyuan with such a long history in the downtown of the capital. It had to be worth a fortune. He's so super rich. Ning Ning, I think that brother-in-law can't just be a military officer, because otherwise he couldn't afford such an expensive house. Chao Wenxin said. If Leng Xiaoting was just a military officer, it would be impossible for him to buy this quadrangle. Well, he has many properties under his name and he hires people to manage those properties for him, but I don't know any details, Gu Ning said. All of a sudden, Gu Ning was a little curious about Leng Xiaoting's properties. She decided to ask him tonight. As for Leng Xiaoting's family background, Gu Ning didn't tell Chao Wenxin. Chao Wenxin told Gu Ning what she had done today and mentioned Su Tongnua. After hearing what had happened to Su Tongnua, an idea dawned on her. Su Tongnua was stunning with excellent acting skills, which meant that she had a lot of potential. She refused to accept the unspoken rules in the entertainment industry, so she had to be a woman with principles. Gu Ning made up her mind to hire Su Tongnua. Of course, she wouldn't jump to conclusions just because of Chao Wenxin's words, so she sent a message to Kay and told him to investigate Su Tongnua. Within 10 minutes, Kay had the result, which proved that what Chao Wenxin had said was true. Su Tongnua had annoyed an important figure and had been shut out of the industry. The company Su Tongnua worked for was Fading Entertainment, which wasn't very famous in the capital but wasn't small either. Gu Ning told Kay to investigate the boss of Fading Entertainment to find out whether he had some dirty secrets or not. If he had, she could use his dirty secrets to threaten him to end the contract with Su Tongnua. Of course, she would talk to him nicely first. If he wasn't willing to do so, she would then threaten him. All test NOVL on novelben/.cm. Wenxin, can you help me contact Su Tongnua? Gu Ning asked. Sure, Chao Wenxin said, although she didn't know why Gu Ning asked the question. Please invite her to meet us tonight. I have something that I want to speak to her about, Gu Ning said. What are you going to talk to her about? Chao Wenxin didn't understand, because they didn't know each other at all. Gu Ning didn't hide her aim and told Chao Wenxin her plan. Chao Wenxin was astonished. Ning Ning, you're so unbelievable. You've established so many companies at such a young age. I feel ashamed of myself now, but can you manage all of those companies yourself? Chao Wenxin was worried after hearing the shocking news. I'm just the behind-scene boss, and I hire able people to help me manage them, Gu Ning said. Will they take advantage of you, because you're so young? Chao Wenxin asked. Do you think that I'm weak? Gu Ning said. Chao Wenxin was struck dumb for a second, then she realized how awesome Gu Ning was. Gu Ning wasn't afraid to face the head of the gang, so she definitely wouldn't be afraid of normal people. Chao Wenxin then called Su Tonghua at once, and told her that Gu Ning was going to sign her. Su Tonghua was excited and agreed to meet them today. Before long, Gu Ning received the email sent by K. As she had assumed, the boss of Fading Entertainment indeed had many dirty secrets. It wasn't uncommon that they all had some dirty secrets. Gu Ning also had something that she would never want others to find out. After dinner, Leng Xiaoting drove Gu Ning and Chao Wenxin to meet Su Tonghua. Gu Ning and Chao Wenxin walked into the appointed place, while Leng Xiaoting waited in the car. When Gu Ning and Chao Wenxin arrived, Su Tonghua was already waiting for them. Seeing Gu Ning, Su Tonghua was surprised, because she didn't expect that Gu Ning was so young. However, she still showed her respect towards Gu Ning even though Gu Ning seemed like a student. Tonghua, please let me introduce you. This is my friend, Gu Ning, Chao Wenxin said to Su Tonghua. Nice to meet you, Miss Gu. Su Tonghua greeted Gu Ning politely. Nice to meet you too, Miss Su. Gu Ning was also polite. Have a seat please, Su Tonghua said. What do you want to drink? A waitress gave Gu Ning and Chao Wenxin a menu. Gu Ning then ordered a coffee, while Chao Wenxin ordered a cup of tea. After ordering, Gu Ning said to Su Tonghua, Miss Su, Wenxin told me something about you a while ago, so I asked her more for details. I think that you're a great actress and I'd like to sign you. If you're willing to work for me, I can help you end your contract with Fading Entertainment. And I can promise you that there are no unspoken rules in my company. You don't need to serve the clients for a job. As long as you're hardworking and loyal to my company, I'll pay you well. As for my company, I will be honest with you. It's already registered, but is still being redecorated, so it's risky if you follow my lead. It all depends on you, and whether you have the courage and ambition to build your career. No unspoken rules, and didn't have to serve those disgusting fat men just for a job. That was exactly what Su Tonghua dreamed for. She didn't really care about the future of Gu Ning's company right now, because she couldn't wait to get rid of Fading, and she was brave enough to set out on an adventurous journey. Therefore, Su Tonghua agreed without hesitation. Miss Gu, I'm willing to follow your lead, because my situation couldn't be worse. I'll also work hard as a skillful actress and be loyal to the company, but, although Su Tonghua was eager to get rid of Fading, she felt uneasy when she thought of the influential figure she had annoyed. The person who shut me out is the son of the vice director of the Cultural Affairs Bureau. This was the capital. Without the government's support, let alone Fading Entertainment, which wasn't very large, even the largest entertainment company couldn't run their business in this place. Power overshadowed capital in this country. Don't worry. I can handle it, Gu Ning said with confidence. Since Gu Ning said so, Su Tonghua chose to believe it, not because of Gu Ning, but because of the power behind Gu Ning. Gu Ning was too young, so Su Tonghua thought that there had to be someone with a high position supporting her behind the scenes. Oh, would you please help me end the contract my assistant has with Fading too? She's very nice, and I want to continue to work with her, Su Tonghua said. No problem. Gu Ning didn't care. Since Su Tonghua already had her favorite assistant, Gu Ning could save some effort in having to help her find one. Thank you so much, Su Tonghua said. All right, I'll go to Fading Entertainment tomorrow around 9:30 a.m. My company is called Fanghua Entertainment, and you're the third person I've hired till now. Welcome to joining us, Gu Ning said and reached out her hand to shake with Su Tonghua. Su Tonghua ached to leave Fading Entertainment, so it wasn't a difficult decision for her to cooperate with Gu Ning. However, they could only sign the contract after Su Tonghua's agreement with Fading Entertainment was ended. They didn't stay there for too long, and separated after a short while. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting drove Chao Wenxin back to the hotel before they went back to their house. It was still early, so Leng Xiaoting hugged Gu Ning while lying on the sofa watching TV. Xiaoting, what are the companies that you have? Gu Ning asked. She only knew about Xingshi Security Company. Gu Ning was finally interested in knowing more about him, so Leng Xiaoting was very happy. I don't know actually, because I've hired other people to manage them for me. The name of my corporation is the Xingshi Group. Leng Xiaoting's corporation was called Xingshi Group, so he thought that he and Gu Ning were meant to be together when Gu Ning told him that her corporation was named Xingning Group. Xingshi Group? Gu Ning was shocked. She had heard of the internationally famous Xingshi Group with over hundreds of billions of yuan in assets. To her astonishment, Leng Xiaoting alone was as affluent as a country. Gu Ning stared at Leng Xiaoting coming on to him and said gently, I didn't expect you're so unbelievably rich. I don't think I need to work at all, you updates tnvel/buy.com. Gu Ning was joking, but Leng Xiaoting was turned on at once. He pressed her to his chest. Sure, but you need to satisfy me first. After saying that, he kissed her. Gu Ning was surprised that he was so horny. Leng Xiaoting, on the other hand, couldn't get enough from Gu Ning. The two had rounds of wild love-making on the sofa afterwards. Gu Ning didn't wake up until 8 o'clock the next morning because she had worked out so hard last night. Leng Xiaoting had already prepared breakfast for her by the time she got out of bed. After breakfast, Gu Ning made a copy of what Kay had sent to her in the email. Seeing the document, Leng Xiaoting asked, Do you need my help? Thanks, but I can handle it, Gu Ning said. I can't rely on you all the time. I need to practice and learn how to deal with my own business. Leng Xiaoting didn't insist, but said, Call me whenever you need me. I will, Gu Ning said, then she put the document into her backpack. Let's go! Su Tonghua arrived at the company before 9 a.m. Although she had already been shut out of the industry, she still had to go to work as usual except on weekends. She had nothing to do, but just sat there. Other actors in the company would make fun of her when they were free. Look, Tonghua is coming to work so early, a female voice said sarcastically behind Su Tonghua. After that, a stylish woman walked inside, followed by several men, like she was the queen. The woman looked at Su Tonghua with obvious arrogance, and the people who followed her also stared at Su Tonghua with disdain. The woman was Li Jiayue, who was also an actress in Fading Entertainment. She had been signed by Fading at the same time as Su Tonghua. However, Su Tonghua was a better actress than her, so Li Jiayue didn't have many chances and hated Su Tonghua very much. She admitted that she wasn't as pretty or skillful as Su Tonghua, but she didn't think she should be ignored because of Su Tonghua. Ever since Su Tonghua had been shut out of the industry after she had refused to accept the unspoken rules, Li Jiayue finally had the chance to become famous by doing what Su Tonghua didn't want to do. Although Li Jiayue wasn't one of the A-list yet, she had already gained a lot of fame and believed that she would be a household name. Soon. Su Tonghua just gave her a glance, but didn't say anything or greet her. You're so rude that you don't greet Jiayue when she's here. Who do you think you are? A big star? Li Jiayue's assistant said acidly. Su Tonghua calmly looked to the assistant and asked, is it in the law that common citizens have to greet a star when she appears? The assistant was mad. Su Tonghua, what do you think you are? What's wrong with your eyes? I'm a human being. Can't you see that? Su Tonghua laughed. The assistant was furious, but didn't know what to say. Seeing her assistant humiliated, Li Jiayue was displeased. Su Tonghua, let's go and see. After that, she walked a few steps, then suddenly stopped, yelling at a girl who was glaring at her. There is nothing to look at. Pour me a coffee right now. The girl was Su Tonghua's assistant, Lin Xiaoxia. Ever since Su Tonghua had been shut out of the industry, Lin Xiaoxia became everyone's servant. Nearly anyone in the company could order her to do trifles. Fine. Lin Xiaoxia was reluctant to do it, but she couldn't reject. Although Su Tonghua wanted to stop it, she couldn't protect her friends since her contact with the company was still valid. When it was almost 9:30 a.m., Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting arrived at Fading Entertainment. Gu Ning walked in alone, while Leng Xiaoting waited in the car. Vist and Velben, CM for new updates. When Gu Ning had just walked to the door and was about to call Su Tonghua, she noticed that a car stopped in front of the building and Xia Jihong, who was the boss of Fading Entertainment, stepped out of it. Chairman Xia, please wait a second, Gu Ning called him. Xia Jihong turned around when he heard someone calling him. When his sight fell on Gu Ning, he was stunned by her beauty, because Gu Ning was even prettier than the actresses in his company. Xia Jihong was lustful, so he leered at Gu Ning when she walked to him. Gu Ning was annoyed by his look, but didn't say anything. May I help, miss? Xia Jihong asked, but he thought Gu Ning must want to be a star like every beautiful young girl. If so, Xia Jihong would have plenty of chances to make advances on her. Xia Jihong was a man who was around 40. He was also fat and ugly. What was worse, he was very lewd and it was disgusting having to talk to him. Gu Ning smiled lightly. I'd like to make a deal with Chairman Xia. Are you free now? Of course. We can talk in my office. Xia Jihong wanted to sexually assault Gu Ning, so he invited her to his office. Although Xia Jihong made Gu Ning feel disgusted, she also preferred to talk with him in the office. On the way, people started to gossip when their chairman walked in with a beautiful young girl. Some thought that Gu Ning was their chairman's relative, while some guessed that she must be a new actress. Gu Ning followed Xia Jihong to his office. Xia Jihong told his secretary to leave, so only Gu Ning and he were in the room. At this time, Xia Jihong almost couldn't wait to press Gu Ning on the sofa. May I know your name, miss? What kind of deal do you want to make with me? I don't think it's necessary for Chairman Xia to know my name. Gu Ning sneered. I came here today to end the contracts that Su Tonghua and her assistant, Lin Xiaoxia, have with you. Hearing that, Xia Jihong was surprised. Obviously, he didn't expect that Gu Ning was here to help Su Tonghua. All of a sudden, he changed his expression and sneered too. You want to help Su Tonghua out? I don't think that's possible. In other words, he refused. What if I insist? Gu Ning smiled. As long as they can afford the liquidated damages, the company can't force them to stay. Otherwise, it's illegal, and I think Chairman Xia should know that. Xia Jihong of course knew that, but didn't take it seriously. Instead, he said with obvious disdain, "Young girl, don't be so naive." Su Tonghua has annoyed an influential figure, and no lawyer would dare to take this case. Gu Ning didn't mind his attitude, but asked, "Are you sure?" "It's impossible. However, if you want to be a star, I can help you with that." Xia Jihong leered at Gu Ning again. "Well, why don't you read this first and have a second thought," Gu Ning said, and took out a document from her backpack, then laid it in front of Xia Jihong. Xia Jihong picked it up with curiosity, but panicked when he read it. Xia Jihong couldn't believe his eyes. The document was evidence of Xia Jihong's crimes, which included rape and bribery. If the women who had been raped by Xia Hongji didn't sue him, the cases wouldn't stand, but the crime of bribery alone could send him to jail for years. Xia Jihong trembled in fear after reading the document. Gu Ning wore a fake smile and asked him again, "Well, do you think that it's possible to end the contracts now?" "Fine, we can, but this document," Xia Jihong compromised without hesitation, because the last thing he wanted to do was to spend the rest of his life in prison. "As long as you agree to let them go, I can pretend that this document never existed. However, if you commit these crimes again, I can't promise what will happen," Gu Ning said. Although Xia Jihong was guilty of crimes, Gu Ning would ignore him this time for Su Tonghua. Great. Xia Jihong immediately agreed. He called his secretary at once and gave the order to end the contracts with Su Tonghua and Lin Xiaoxia. Hearing that, his secretary was shocked, because it would annoy the influential figure that nobody in this industry wanted to have bad blood with. Although his secretary was curious, he knew that he shouldn't ask any questions. Gu Ning had sent a message to Su Tonghua and told her to wait for her news. Su Tonghua trusted Gu Ning's ability, but she was still nervous while waiting for the result. After Xia Jihong's secretary told them to go to Xia Jihong's office, Su Tonghua was finally relieved. "Tonghua, why does the chairman want to see us in his office?" Lin Xiaoxia didn't know that Su Tonghua was going to leave the company, so she was worried. "Is he going to force you to do something disgusting again?" Thinking of that, Lin Xiaoxia was mad. Su Tonghua smiled lightly. "Xiaoxia, do you still remember that I told you that if I'm going to leave this company, you'll go with me?" "Yes," Lin Xiaoxia said, but she still didn't understand why their chairman wanted to see them in his office. "Let's go." "You'll find out soon." Su Tonghua didn't tell Lin Xiaoxia directly, but pulled her, quickly walking to the chairman's office. When Lin Xiaoxia found out that they could leave the company, she was thrilled. Although she could quit her job at any time, there was nothing better than that she could leave together with Su Tonghua. Xia Jihong didn't even dare to ask for the liquidated damages. And since he didn't mention it, Gu Ning wouldn't bother to pay him. After that, Su Tonghua and Lin Xiaoxia went back to their office and packed their stuff. Everyone around them was surprised. "What are you doing?" someone asked. "Leaving this place," Su Tonghua said happily. "What? Leaving Fading Entertainment? You ended your contract?" Everyone was shocked. Su Tonghua and Lin Xiaoxia packed their stuff and went straight downstairs. Gu Ning was waiting for them at the front door. The shocking news that Su Tonghua successfully ended her contract with Fading Entertainment quickly went abroad in the company. It was universally known that Su Tonghua had annoyed an influential figure that their chairman didn't dare to irritate. If Su Tonghua was able to end her contract, either the influential figure forgave her or she had support from another more influential figure. Li Jiayue smashed a cup on the floor when she heard the news. She refused to accept the fact that Su Tonghua was going to be famous, and made up her mind to be more successful than Su Tonghua. Although Su Tonghua already ended her contract with Fading, Gu Ning still had something to discuss with her, so Gu Ning told Lin Xiaoxia to leave before them, while Su Tonghua and Gu Ning went to a nearby cafe. Ling Xiaoting was still patiently waiting for Gu Ning in the car. Gu Ning took out the contract and gave it to Su Tonghua. Here is the contract. If there is no problem, you can sign it. Soo Tongnua read the contract through and was completely surprised when she noticed the ratio of the company's take to her take. It was 6-4, which meant the company would take 60% while she could have 40% of the profit. Usually, the ratio was 8-2. If the actors were A-list, the ratio would be 7-3, and it was rare to see 6-4 unless the actor was a household name. Boss, are you sure? Soo Tongnua asked with uncertainty. Gu Ning smiled. Yes, I'm sure. It's just the beginning. If you can become one of the A-list, the ratio will be 5-5. Work hard. Soo Tongnua was shocked again. If she could become an A-list actress, she could have 50% of the profit. Her new boss was really generous. After the shock, Soo Tongnua. The company would provide a single-bedroom apartment for her and pay the utilities. If she had her own house, the company would give her 3,000 yuan monthly as a housing allowance and reimburse her for utilities. Although Soo Tongnua had been shut out of the entertainment industry for a year, she had been famous before and had made a lot of money too, so she had her own house. In that case, she chose to have the housing allowance of 3,000 yuan. At the end of the contract, Soo Tongnua signed her name. The company building is still being redecorated, so we are renting a studio for now. After the Lantern Festival, we're going to shoot a TV series. Although you work for me now, I've promised the director that he could choose actors on his own. Therefore, I don't know whether you can be the leading actress, but you'll have an audition for it. And since you have already joined us, I will definitely help you become famous. If you can't get the leading role, I can let you play a role with some lines in the show at least. Don't worry. You'll have plenty of chances in the future. Oh, our company is brand new, so no famous actors will join us yet. And we might use many new actors. I hope you don't mind or feel aggrieved, Gu Ning said. I won't. Thank you so much. Soo Tongnua didn't care if she could only be a role with several lines in the show. As long as she could show up again, she was happy enough. In addition, she would work hard for her future. 2. All right, I'll inform you about the specific schedule later. You can leave now. After that, Gu Ning and Soo Tongnua separated. It was almost 11 a.m., so Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting went to have lunch first. After lunch, Gu Ning rested for a while before she went to Colane Pharmaceutical Company around 2 p.m. The production lines were all ready and Gu Ning took a bottle of power crystals. There was 100 crystals in the bottle and each was the size of a pearl and shone like a diamond. Afterwards, a power crystal was taken out to be tested. As the result showed, it didn't contain any chemicals at all, which surprised everyone in the factory. Even water contained hydrogen and oxygen, but the power crystal was like something that never even existed. Since there were no harmful chemicals in the power crystal, it was safe to be used in the medicine. Workers in the medical factory then started to make medicines with the help of machines. The first kind was cold medicine. The original ingredients were acetaminophen, amantadine hydrochloride, caffeine, artificial bezoar, chlorpheniramine maleate, and now added power crystal. Of course, they wouldn't mention power crystal on the composition table. The ratio of power crystal to the original ingredients was 1-10. If the original ingredients weighed a kilogram, then the power crystal would be 100 grams. Hours later, the cold medicine was ready. After the second test, it showed nothing different from their old one, but its effect was greatly enhanced. A worker who coincidentally had a cold would be the human guinea pig. Since they had already tested it twice, it wouldn't be harmful, so the worker agreed. Once the pill was in his mouth, he felt a comfortable coldness spreading through his body. Within 3 minutes, he felt much better. The proportion of power crystal in this cold medicine wasn't large, so he wouldn't recover that quickly, but its effect was already amazing enough. As for the makeup production, Gu Ning decided to produce masks, creams, lotions, serum, and so on, and the ratio would be 2:10. Gu Ning talked with Ning Changkai for a while longer later and told him to deal with the store and decoration as soon as possible. Afterwards, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting left. It was almost 5 p.m. when they left, so Gu Ning called Chao Wenxin and invited her to dine together. Gu Ning had been busy all day, and Leng Xiaoting didn't have much time to be alone with her, but now Chao Wenxin would join them again. Leng Xiaoting was a little unhappy, but didn't say anything. Gu Ning also understood that Leng Xiaoting would rather be alone with her, but she couldn't abandon Chao Wenxin in the hotel. Tang Yinfan had been in City D for 2 days, and had also visited the university that Gu Man had studied in, as well as the place where he had the accident, but he still failed to remember anything. Tang Yinfan almost lost his patience. In order to find some clues, Tang Yinfan flew to City F and went to the shopping mall where Kame Beauty Salon was in. He wore a mask and hid in a corner, trying to catch glances of Gu Man. Around 5:30 p.m., Gu Man also got off work. Gu Qin was absent today, so she went home alone. It was getting warmer after the New Year festival, and it was a sunny day. Gu Man was in a dark brown woolen coat wearing light makeup with her hair casually tied up, and looked very elegant and noble. When Tang Yinfan, who was hidden in a corner, saw Gu Man coming out of the salon, he was stunned and felt the strange intimacy again. However, he still couldn't remember anything. Gu Man didn't drive, and Gao Yi and Xiaoyu weren't with her, so she took a taxi home. Tang Yinfan then drove a car, following her till Fanghua Luxury Mansion. Gu Man was going to do grocery shopping in a nearby supermarket, so she got out outside of Fanghua Luxury Mansion. There were 3 hoodlums fooling around. And when Gu Man appeared in their sight, they had an idea to rob her. They gave each other a knowing glance, then walked to Gu Man. All of a sudden, one of them grabbed Gu Man's handbag and ran away. Gu Man was very scared and shouted, "A robber!" Gu Man wanted to chase him, but was afraid of getting hurt. Tang Yinfan was following Gu Man all the way, so he immediately chased the thief. Although Tang Yinfan had aged, he was still able to run and fight like a soldier from the special forces. Within minutes, he beat the 3 hoodlums down and took back Gu Man's handbag. However, when Tang Yinfan walked to Gu Man with her handbag in his hand, he felt a little shy to look her in the eye. "Thank you so much, sir," Gu Man said sincerely. Tang Yinfan said in a low voice, "You're welcome. Sir, if you don't mind, may I invite you to share a meal with me?" "I want to thank you for your brave and kind behavior," Gu Man said. Although they were merely strangers, he had helped her, so she was grateful. "No need. Bye." Tang Yinfan rejected, because he didn't want her to see his face. After that, he turned around, walking to the sales hall of Fanghua Luxury Mansion. Tang Yinfan planned to buy an apartment here, especially one that was near Gu Man's home. Watching Tang Yinfan walking away from her, Gu Man suddenly felt like he was familiar, but she didn't think further and went to the supermarket. Tang Yinfan was lucky and bought a well-decorated apartment right opposite Gu Man's home. In other words, he was able to see into the living room of Gu Man's apartment. Both Gu Ning and Chao Wenxin were leaving the capital the next day, and they would go to the airport together. Gu Ning's flight would take off at 1:50 p.m., while Chao Wenxin's was at 1:35 p.m., so they would have lunch together before heading to the airport. Chao Wenxin said to Gu Ning, "Ning, my friend told me to thank you for what you did for Su Tongnua." Su Tongnua and Ai Xinyu were close friends, while Ai Xinyu and Chao Wenxin were close friends too, so Chao Wenxin would love to thank Gu Ning for Ai Xinyu's sake. "No big deal. Su Tongnua is the person I wanted to sign to," Gu Ning said. After grocery shopping, Gu Man went back home and cooked for herself. In the opposite apartment, Tang Yunfan could sometimes see Gu Man walking through the living room. During the night, Gu Man sat in the living room watching TV. Gu Qing came to chat with her for a while, and then left. Gu Man was alone again. Seeing that Gu Man was alone and seemed lonely, Tang Yunfan felt uncomfortable and his heart ached for her. He wanted to keep her company, but he still couldn't remember anything. That night, Gu Ning barely slept, because Leng Xiaoting wouldn't let her sleep. Gu Ning was leaving tomorrow, and Leng Xiaoting didn't know when they would meet again, so he wildly made love to her countless times. Ning Ning, tell me. Am I good? Every man wanted to be complimented about their sexual ability. Home Reincarnation of the Businesswoman at School Chapter 459, Am I good? Of course you are. Gu Ning had to admit that Leng Xiaoting was quite good in bed, but she could hardly afford to at the moment because with Gu Ning's affirmative answer, Leng Xiaoting moved harder. I can't take it anymore. Gu Ning wanted to stop him, but he wouldn't stop. And Gu Ning wasn't willing to protect herself in such a situation because even though it was overwhelming, she still wanted to feel it. Ning Ning, I love you. I love you so much. Leng Xiaoting didn't stop, because he was about to come and wanted to rub Gu Ning into his body. Xiaoting, I love you too. I really love you too. Gu Ning's sweet words made Leng Xiaoting move more violently. It was a little too violent for Gu Ning to enjoy it, but she still had a nice orgasm. The next day, Gu Man and Gu Qing left their homes around 8:30 a.m. Jiangsu drove them to the shopping mall before he went to his store. Jiangsu's construction materials store was gradually becoming popular. Especially after Gu Ning's identity had been exposed, many businessmen would turn to Jiangsu for cooperation in order to maintain a good relationship with Gu Ning's family. Therefore, Jiangsu was very busy now. Ever since Gu Qing and Gu Man left Fanghua Luxury Mansion, Tang Yunfan followed them. Leng Xiaoting got up early that morning as usual to prepare breakfast for Gu Ning. However, Gu Ning was so exhausted that she didn't wake up until 9 a.m. After breakfast, Leng Xiaoting pressed her into his arms and they had sex again. When it was almost 10 a.m., they left for Huangdang Hotel. Gu Qing and Gu Man went to a nearby restaurant to dine together. Unexpectedly, Gu Qingxiang showed up out of the blue and came to borrow money from Gu Qing and Gu Man. Qing, Man, I know that I've done many things wrong, but let bygones be bygones. We're biological siblings. Can't you help this time? Gu Qingxiang said. It was the first time that he ever had been so polite to Gu Qing and Gu Man. Biological siblings? Gu Qingxiang was utterly shameless. Not only had he bullied them ever since they were young, he had also refused to lend them money when Gu Ning had been in the car accident and could have died at any moment. And now, he suddenly played the family card when trying to borrow money from them? Gu Qing and Gu Man stayed calm and cold. No, we can't help you. Please stay away from us, Gu Man said. How can you be so cold-blooded? Although this wasn't the first time Gu Qingxiang had been rejected, he couldn't accept it. They were cold-blooded? Gu Qing immediately retorted. When Ningning was in that car accident, we went to borrow just 10,000 yuan from you, but you refused without hesitation. Ningning could have died. Do you think it's possible that you can borrow dozens of millions of yuan from us now? Although it wasn't Gu Qingxiang's duty to lend them money, he was rich and Gu Ning's life had been in danger. However, he still refused to help them. He was very selfish. Gu Qing and Gu Man weren't dumb, nor were they weak. It was quite understandable that Gu Man wasn't willing to lend him money. Tang Yunfan was sitting at the table next to them, so he heard their conversation clearly. He was very mad that Ningning's biological uncle was such a selfish and shameless man. Ningning's fine now. What's the big deal? Gu Qingxiang argued. He didn't feel guilty at all. This time, Gu Qing and Gu Man couldn't tolerate it anymore. How can you say that? Gu Qing criticized him in anger. We will not lend you any money. It doesn't matter what you think of us, Gu Man said coldly. You can sell your company if you want money. We were able to live our life on dozens of thousands of yuan a year in the past, and you can survive too. Gu Man! Are you saying that we can't live a good life? Gu Qingxiang snapped at Gu Man. In his eyes, Gu Man couldn't wait to see him living a poor life. I don't care what you think of us. It has nothing to do with us whether you live a good life or not. If you dare to harass us again, we'll call the police. Gu Man said icily. Gu Qingxiang was furious, but couldn't say anything. He was so selfish that he would never blame himself for his own mistakes. Ah! How can he be so shameless? I'm so mad that I have such a useless older brother. Gu Qing said. There. It isn't worth being upset over such a man. Gu Man comforted her. Gu Ning and Chao Wenxin left for the airport together around 12 a.m. On the way, Ling Xiaoting stayed quiet because he didn't want to leave Gu Ning. Gu Ning also had the same feeling, but they had to deal with their own businesses. When they arrived at the airport, Ling Xiaoting didn't leave until Gu Ning walked into the lounge and disappeared from his sight. The gates Gu Ning and Chao Wenxin would be boarding through weren't far from each other, so Gu Ning went to sit with Chao Wenxin while they were waiting. At this time, Xin Bei walked over. They were all surprised to see each other again. Hi, Gu Ning, are you going to City B too? Xin Bei asked Gu Ning and ignored Chao Wenxin. Chao Wenxin also turned her eyes away from him. Not really. Wenxin is going back to City B, and I'm going back to City F. It's not departure time yet, so I decided to sit with Wenxin for a while, Gu Ning said. How about you? Where are you flying? Xin Bei sat next to Gu Ning and replied, I'm flying to City B. I'm going to visit my uncle for the Lantern Festival. Although both Xin Bei and Chao Wenxin knew that it was just a misunderstanding when they had met each other for the first time, they still disliked one another because of the terrible first impression. Therefore, they both kept talking to Gu Ning, trying to ignore each other. Gu Ning didn't want to be involved in their conflict, so she made an excuse, walking to the ladies' room. I'll go with you. Chao Wenxin immediately stood up and followed Gu Ning. Why do you still hate him? I thought that you already knew that it was just a misunderstanding, Gu Ning asked with doubt. Chao Wenxin contorted her mouth. I simply don't like him. Fine. You win, Gu Ning said. A while later, passengers who were flying to City B started to board, including Xin Bei and Chao Wenxin, but they deliberately kept a distance from each other. However, no matter how much they disliked one another, they coincidentally sat next to each other in first class. What the F***ck? Both of them swore at the same time. And glared at each other afterwards at the same time too. Chao Wenxin turned her head away in order to not see Xin Bei, so she wouldn't be in a worse mood. Meanwhile, a fragrant breeze blew past their noses, and a gentle female voice sounded by Xin Bei's ear. Sir, the plane is about to take off. Please fasten your safety belt. Thanks. Xin Bei smiled politely and reached out his hands to fasten the safety belt, but the stewardess had already squatted by him. Sir, please let me help. However, before the stewardess could touch the safety belt, Xin Bei rejected politely. No need, thank you so much. It wasn't the first time that Xin Bei had been treated so well in a plane, and he knew the reason clearly. All the stewardesses wanted to hit on the handsome young man who was sitting in first class. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. The beautiful stewardess stopped her hands and looked disappointed. "I'm sorry if I've bothered you, sir." Chow Wen-shin snorted with laughter, but didn't say anything. The plane soon took off. When it flew steadily, the stewardess intentionally walked by Xianbei many times, but Xianbei lowered his head reading the entire time and ignored her. Finally, when it was time to serve drinks to passengers on the plane, the stewardess walked to Xianbei first. "Sir, what would you like to drink?" "Coke, thanks," Xianbei said, but didn't give the stewardess a glance. The stewardess was very disappointed, but didn't show it because she had been well trained to be polite. "No problem. Please wait a second." Before long, the stewardess poured a glass of Coke for Xianbei. Maybe because she was too focused on Xianbei, the stewardess directly forgot to ask Chow Wen-shin what she wanted, and Chow Wen-shin was very displeased. "Hey, what about me?" The stewardess was struck dumb for a second and turned to Chow Wen-shin at once. "Oh, I'm sorry. What would you like to have, miss?" "Coffee," Chow Wen-shin said. The stewardess then gave the coffee to Chow Wen-shin. However, when Chow Wen-shin had just taken it, the plane suddenly had turbulence and the coffee slipped from her hand onto Xianbei. Chow Wen-shin couldn't help laughing, but Xianbei was mad. He looked at Chow Wen-shin, who was gloating, and clenched his teeth. "Chow Wen-shin, you must have done it on purpose." Chow Wen-shin didn't feel guilty at all. The stewardess, instead, panicked and apologized in a hurry. "Sir, I'm so sorry. Please let me help you wipe." Saying that, she took out a towel and wanted to help Xianbei wipe the coffee stains off. "No, thanks. I'll do it myself." Xianbei grabbed her towel, cleaning the coffee stains from his chest on his own. The stewardess was disappointed after Xianbei had rejected her twice, so she left quietly, knowing that it was impossible for her to get near the man. Xianbei glared at Chow Wen-shin again, and Chow Wen-shin stopped laughing. Although she laughed, she didn't want to cause any more misunderstandings, so she explained. "It was not on purpose. It was because of the turbulence." Xianbei was mad at Chow Wen-shin, but he didn't say anything and stood up, walking to the washroom. They disliked each other, so they barely talked. When there was no conflict, both of them were silent. After a while, Chow Wen-shin was going to the washroom and walked by Xianbei. Coincidentally, the plane had turbulence again, and Chow Wen-shin directly fell into Xianbei. Chow Wen-shin was surprised and instantly reached out her hand to grab something in order to keep her balance, but her hand was about to touch Xianbei's chest at this time. Xianbei didn't like Chow Wen-shin, so he wanted to see her fall and wasn't willing to let her touch him. Therefore, he hit her hand away. However, right after the hit, another accident happened. Chow Wen-shin's hand was hit away by Xianbei, so she lost her balance and fell onto Xianbei with her hand accidentally pressed against Xianbei's penis. Being attacked all of a sudden, Xianbei felt great pain and pushed Chow Wen-shin away with great force. "Chow Wen-shin." Xianbei clenched his teeth once more, glaring at her. Nonetheless, when Xianbei saw Chow Wen-shin's face, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." It was the first time that Chow Wen-shin had ever touched a man's penis, so her face flushed completely, and she ran to the washroom in a hurry. Xianbei, on the other hand, was left in great pain on the seat. How could he be so unlucky today? The plane always seemed to have turbulence at the wrong time. Xianbei now regretted that he had hit Chow Wen-shin's hand away. If he hadn't done that, his penis wouldn't have been injured. Chow Wen-shin quickly ran into the washroom and saw that her face was as red as a cooked lobster. She immediately turned on the faucet, trying to cool her face with the running water. Her face gradually cooled down after being patted with cold water, but her heart still kept pounding fast. Chao Wenxin didn't dare to leave the washroom and stayed there for over 20 minutes. Someone waiting outside eventually lost patience and knocked on the door. "Hey, are you going to stay inside forever?" Chao Wenxin then realized that she had stayed in the washroom for too long. Luckily, she had calmed down a lot, so she inhaled deeply before she walked out. However, thinking of having to meet Xianbei again, Chao Wenxin was still nervous. She glanced around trying to find a vacant seat. Unfortunately, there were no vacant seats. Chao Wenxin felt helpless. She had never been in such an embarrassing situation before and really didn't know how to deal with it. In the end, Chao Wenxin had to go back to her seat. Xianbei probably also had no idea how to face Chao Wenxin, so he was wearing an eye mask, lying on his seat, but no one knew whether he was really sleeping except himself. Seeing that Xianbei was sleeping, Chao Wenxin was relieved. She quietly walked by him, going back to her seat, and immediately put on her eye mask. However, she couldn't fall asleep and couldn't help thinking about what had just happened. Chao Wenxin thought that she should never appear at the same place as Xianbei, because nothing good had happened any time they showed up together. It was over half an hour before they landed in City B, and it was torture for Chao Wenxin. Finally, the plane landed, but Chao Wenxin was getting increasingly nervous, because she would see Xianbei again when they got off the plane. It would drive her crazy. When the plane stopped, Xianbei stood up, walking to the door at once, because he felt embarrassed to meet Chao Wenxin too. Feeling Xianbei walking away, Chao Wenxin relaxed. She took off her eye mask, but didn't get off the plane until 2/3 of the passengers were gone. Therefore, she perfectly avoided Xianbei. It took at least 3 hours from the capital to City F, so Gu Ning was still in the plane. At this time, Ling Xiaoting already gone back to the Ling family's house. Ling Xiaoxuan and Ling Xiaojiao were quarreling violently in the yard. It was all because of a bonsai. The bonsai was Ling Xiaoxuan's, and it was an orchid of a rare species. Ling Xiaoxuan put the bonsai in the yard, but it was knocked over by Ling Xiaojia. Ling Xiaojia didn't feel guilty at all, and refused to apologize. She had even mocked him. Ling Xiaoxuan was so angry that he had torn the piece of paper with Ling Xiaojia's new design on it into pieces. The two had argued with each other ever since they were kids, but neither of them could win, so they kept quarreling all the time. Ling Xiaoxuan wouldn't punch Ling Xiaojia because she was a girl. Ling Xiaojia also understood that. Therefore, no matter how much she hated him, she never dared to hit Ling Xiaoxuan. The housekeeper tried to separate them in vain, so he gave up. "Lord Ling, welcome home," Ling Changji said to Ling Xiaoting. Ling Xiaoxuan also ignored Ling Xiaojia, and quickly walked to Ling Xiaoting. "Xiaoting, you're finally home. Would you please practice Kung Fu with me?" Although he was hardly comparable to Ling Xiaoting, Ling Xiaoxuan wouldn't miss any chance to practice with him. That was how he made progress. Seeing Ling Xiaoting, there was hatred that flashed through Ling Xiaojia's eyes, but she didn't dare to argue with him, so she turned around and walked away. Ling Xiaoting didn't care about Ling Xiaojia's attitude towards him, and he agreed to practice Kung Fu with Ling Xiaoxuan after visiting his grandpa. It was a cold winter, and Master Ling was reading in his study. "Hi, I thought that I wouldn't see you again during the festival," Master Ling complained once Ling Xiaoting appeared in his sight. Ling Xiaoting took out a porcelain bottle and placed it on the table before Master Ling. "Here, this is for you." "A porcelain bottle? Is it a real antique?" Master Ling asked. "It's not the bottle but the thing inside it," Ling Xiaoting said. "The thing inside?" Master Ling was surprised. He opened the bottle and noticed that there was a round pill the size of a pearl that was shining like a diamond inside. "What is this?" "A special medicine. It's good for your body and you can take a pill every 3 days," Leng Xiaoting said. Although Leng Xiaoting trusted Gu Ning, this medicine was a gift to his grandpa, so he had to be careful and took a pill beforehand. The pill melted in his mouth within a second, and he felt a cold air spreading through his body. Once he took the medicine, he found that some of his old injuries recovered gradually. And that was when he realized that this medicine was really effective. Master Ling then poured a pill into his mouth. He had the same experience as Leng Xiaoting. "Wow, what medicine is this? I feel a cold air spreading through my body. It's quite comfortable." Leng Xiaoting didn't answer his grandpa's question because he didn't know the answer either. Most up-to-date NVELs are published on n0velgn.co/m. Lin Li Juan and her 2 rich friends went shop today. One had had conflict with Gu Ning before and was called Jean Lanqin. The other one was the same age as Lin Li Juan. She was called Mrs. Yang. Mrs. Yang was Lin Li Juan and Jean Lanqin's new friend. Her family had over 100 million yuan in wealth, which was much more than the Gu family had, so Lin Li Juan kept flattering Mrs. Yang. "I heard that the real boss of Jade Beauty Jewelry, the most popular jewelry brand recently, is an 18-year-old girl. I think her name is Gu Ning, and she lives in City F2. She's such an outstanding girl," Mrs. Yang said, but she didn't know the relationship between Lin Li Juan and Gu Ning, so she wasn't finding fault with Lin Li Juan. Hearing that, Lin Li Juan was displeased. She hated Gu Ning and her family so much that her heart felt like it was being stabbed every time she heard one of their names. She didn't feel pain, but hatred and humiliation. She still couldn't figure out how, or accept that Gu Ning became so rich all of a sudden. She wished that her own daughter could be so successful as well. In that case, she didn't have to flatter others anymore, but other people would do their best to please her. "I heard that news too. And I'm so jealous of her parents because they have such an outstanding daughter." Although Jean Lanqin had previously had conflict with Gu Ning, she didn't know her name, and Lin Li Juan didn't tell her either, so she also had no idea about the relationship between Gu Ning and Lin Li Juan. Hearing that they were complimenting Gu Ning, Lin Li Juan was full of animosity towards Gu Ning, but she couldn't say anything because what they had said was the truth. "I went to City G once after I heard the news. I think the jewelry in Jade Beauty Jewelry is more beautiful and of higher quality than jewelry that I've seen in other jewelry stores. I bought a pair of earrings, a necklace and a bracelet. They cost me 1,000,000 yuan. Mrs. Yang said and was showing off. "Mrs. Yang, I'm so envious of you. You can buy anything you like without caring about the price. Not like us. We couldn't afford that," Jean Lanqin said and flattered. Mrs. Yang was pleased. She enjoyed shopping with other women who were poorer than her, because their poverty could accentuate her wealth. Gu Man, at the same time, was ready to go home. Gu Ning was coming back today, so she was going to prepare a meal for her daughter. However, when she had just gotten downstairs, she encountered Lin Li Juan. Lin Li Juan was already in a bad mood when her friends complimented Gu Ning, and now she was in a worse mood when Gu Man appeared. In the past, Lin Li Yuan was always better than Gu Man, but now there was a huge abyss between them. Even so, she still hated seeing Gu Man because of jealousy, and she even wished that Gu Man could be poor again. "Oh, Li Juan, isn't this your poor sister-in-law?" Before Lin Li Juan could say a word, Jean Lanqin opened her mouth first. Gu Man now didn't seem poor at all, and dressed like an elegant lady who was even richer than Mrs. Yang. Hearing what Jean Lanqin had said, Lin Li Juan felt a little embarrassed. Mrs. Yang, on the other hand, was displeased. She looked to Jean Lanqin and said, "Mrs. Pan, although several million yuan in wealth isn't very rich, I don't think you can call it poor." The family name of Jean Lanqin's husband was Pan, so Mrs. Yang called her Mrs. Pan. From what Mrs. Yang said, she had to know Gu Man. What? Jean Lanqin was astonished. She has several million yuan in wealth? Jean Lanqin abruptly turned to Lin Lijuan. Seeing Lin Lijuan showing jealousy towards Gu Man, she immediately realized that what Mrs. Yang had said was true. How is it possible? Jean Lanqin was shocked. "Hi, Mrs. Yang." Gu Man greeted Mrs. Yang politely, but wasn't flattering her. "Hi, are you going home now?" Mrs. Yang replied politely too, and didn't show any arrogance like she had in front of Lin Lijuan and Jean Lanqin. In Mrs. Yang's eyes, although Gu Man only had several million yuan in wealth, she was a good friend of Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu were the real noble ladies. Mrs. Yang felt jealous of them sometimes, but she knew that it was better for her to maintain a good relationship with them. Gu Qing and Gu Man had also attended many parties along with Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu these days, so they got to know many other rich ladies. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu were aware that Gu Ning was the real boss of Jade Beauty Jewelry, but Gu Man told them not to tell others that Gu Ning was her daughter. Therefore, even though many rich ladies knew that the real boss of Jade Beauty Jewelry was an 18-year-old girl, they didn't know that she was Gu Man's daughter. Since Gu Qing and Gu Man were good friends of Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu, nobody dared to despise them. "Yes. Please excuse me, Mrs. Yang. I must leave now," Gu Man said before she left. From the beginning to the end, Gu Man didn't bother to look at Lin Lijuan and Jean Lanqin. Seeing that, Mrs. Yang realized that Gu Man didn't get along with Lin Lijuan. Maybe she had a bad relationship with Lin Lijuan. Without hesitation, Mrs. Yang decided to stay away from Lin Lijuan and Jean Lanqin. Although Lin Lijuan hated to see Gu Man, she still felt displeased when Gu Man ignored her during the meeting. "Lijuan, what happened? How come your poor sister-in-law suddenly became rich?" Jean Lanqin asked with curiosity. Lin Lijuan didn't want to talk about Gu Man at all, so she didn't answer Jean Lanqin's question. Mrs. Yang, on the other hand, interrupted. "She's the boss of Kame Beauty Salon. Although she isn't very rich compared to us, she definitely isn't poor either." "All right, I think that's enough for today. I have an appointment tonight, so I have to leave now," Mrs. Yang said and directly turned around walking away. "What?" Jean Lanqin didn't expect that Mrs. Yang would leave all of a sudden and not care about their feelings at all. Mrs. Yang was the one who had called them to shop with her. Lin Lijuan, however, understood that Mrs. Yang left because of Gu Man. Lin Lijuan almost went crazy then, and wasn't in the mood to shop any longer, so she left too. Jean Lanqin was left alone in the shopping mall, and was quite furious, but she didn't dare to annoy either of them, so she could only swallow her anger. When Lin Lijuan got home, Gu Qingxiang, Gu Xiaoxiao and Gu Qingyun were there too, but none of them were in a good mood. Gu Qingxiang was mad because he had failed to borrow money from Gu Man. Lin Lijuan was also unhappy because of what had happened in the shopping mall, while Gu Xiaoxiao and Gu Qingyun were also upset about their own problems. The moment that Lin Lijuan got home, she threw her handbag onto the sofa and sat down angrily. "I'm so mad now. I went to shop with Mrs. Yang in the shopping mall today, but Mrs. Yang abandoned me after meeting Gu Man. Who does she think she is? How could she treat me like that?" Lin Lijuan definitely didn't dare to say that in front of Mrs. Yang, but she would badmouth Mrs. Yang behind her back. She was the one who did her best to please Mrs. Yang, and now she was also the one who kept complaining behind Mrs. Yang's back. And how did Gu Man dare to ignore me? Lin Lijuan felt like she had been humiliated. Lin Lijuan wouldn't stop complaining, which aggravated Gu Qingxiang, who was already in a bad mood. "Enough. Stop complaining. Lin Lijuan then closed her mouth unwillingly. After a while of silence, Gu Qingyun said, Dad, all my friends have cars. Buy me a car. Please. Although they had been rich for a long time, Gu Qingxiang didn't buy Gu Qingyun a car yet, because he planned to do that after Gu Qingyun's graduation. However, Gu Qingyun couldn't wait that long, because all his friends had cars. A car? My company can barely stay afloat right now, and you want me to buy you a car? Are you insane? Gu Qingxiang got angry and yelled. What? The company can barely stay afloat? They were all shocked. I haven't signed a big contract in a long time, and I have already begun to use my savings to pay the workers' salaries, Gu Qingxiang said. There was a growing number of interior decoration companies, and his company was facing stronger competition in the market. As a result, he was running business that was getting worse and worse. Gu Qingxiang even had to use his own savings to pay his workers' salaries, but it couldn't last, and he would soon go bankrupt. What should we do now? Lin Lijuan asked anxiously. Dad, Gu Ning's so rich now. She can give us dozens of millions of yuan, and our company will be saved, Gu Xiaoxiao said, and took it for granted that Gu Ning would give them anything. Gu Qingxiang's company only had 20 million yuan in assets at its peak, but they wanted to ask Gu Ning for dozens of millions of yuan at a time. Exactly. You can borrow money from Gu Man, Lin Lijuan said, but they all knew that it was impossible for them to pay Gu Man back. I've already spoken to Gu Man today, but she refused to lend me the money. Gu Qingxiang said angrily. What? She refused? How can she be so cold-blooded? You're her older brother. Lin Lijuan shouted. Indeed. How can she be so cold-blooded? Gu Xiaoxiao echoed, like they were the victims. Gu Qingyun didn't say a word but had the same thought. Gu Qingxiang's family was so shameless and selfish, and they would never reflect on themselves. When Gu Qing and Gu Man had been poor in the past, they had never treated them fairly. However, once they needed Gu Qing and Gu Man's help, they suddenly took it for granted that Gu Qing and Gu Man had to help them. Gu Qingxiang sighed. Gu Man refused because I wasn't willing to lend them money last time when Gu Ning needed a surgery. Isn't Gu Ning fine now? Since she's fine, it's no big deal. Lin Lijuan said, and didn't feel guilty at all. The family was digging their own graves. Gu Ning arrived at City F at around 5 p.m. Once she got off the plane, she sent Leng shouting a message and told him that she was safe home. On the way from the airport to her home, Gu Ning called Gao Yi and asked how everything was going. Luckily, everything was going well. Xinhua Real Estate had been busy recently, so they turned to another construction company for the construction and refurbishment of the hotels and restaurants. The number of their company's management was limited, so Gao Yi and Xiaoyu worked as supervisors in 2 different cities. Gu Ning again assigned Gao Yi and Xiaoyu a task. She told them to search for talented or skillful people in the cities that they were in, and hire them to work for Gu Ning's companies. Gu Ning didn't want to poach staff from other companies, because it was very likely that those people would leave her companies for the same reason. Therefore, she preferred to train her own people in order to win their loyalty. When Gu Ning got home, it was almost 6 p.m., and the meal was almost ready too. Gu Qing and Jiang Xinyue were also there, while Jiang Su was absent for a business meal. When Gu Ning had just been in the living room for a few minutes, she sensed a gaze which was staring at the living room from outside. Gu Ning didn't look around at once, instead she walked to the curtain. She hid herself behind the curtain, and searched for the gaze then. Gu Ning was very surprised when she found out that it was Tang Yunfan who was staring at her home. Did he find, or remember something? Obviously, Tang Yunfan kept focusing on Gu Ning's home for a reason. And Gu Ning guessed that Tang Yunfan must have found out something instead of remembering something. Otherwise, he would directly visit her home, rather than secretly staring at them. Knowing that it was Tang Yunfan, Gu Ning relaxed. She decided not to reveal that she knew, and she would give him a helping hand when it was necessary. "The meal is ready," Gu Man said. And they gathered in the dining room. Tang Yunfan had no idea that Gu Ning had already discovered him. He still stood by the window looking at the living room. However, they all went to the dining room and there was nobody left in the living room. Tang Yunfan had visited many places and met many people these days, but he still failed to remember anything, which was torture for him. At this time, Tang Yunfan's phone rang. The caller was Tang Haifeng. Tang Yunfan answered it at once. "Father. Are you still on the business trip? Tomorrow is the Lantern Festival. Will you be coming back?" Tang Haifeng asked. He didn't know that Tang Yunfan was in City F now, because Tang Yunfan's secretary told him that Tang Yunfan was on a business trip. "Don't wait for me. I'll come home if I can make it," Tang Yunfan said. He was confused about whether he should leave City F or not. "Fine," Tang Haifeng said. During the meal, Gu Man and Gu Qing kept persuading Gu Ning to eat more. "Teenagers at your age are enjoying themselves all day, but you're busy running your business. Look at you. You've lost a lot of weight." Gu Man almost cried when she saw that her daughter worked so hard to provide them a good life. "Exactly. We are already living a good life now, so you can relax too. We understand that you have your plans and ambitions, and we won't stop you, but you have to take good care of yourself. Nothing is more important than your health, all right?" Gu Qing said. She also cared about Gu Ning a lot. Gu Ning was deeply touched. She now had a family who truly cared about her. "Mom, Aunt, don't worry. I will take good care of myself," Gu Ning said. In order to make them happy, Gu Ning did her best to eat as much as she could, and she was very full at the end. Once Chu Pei Han heard that Gu Ning was back, she invited all of their friends to gather together. The appointed place was Dihao Clubhouse, but they had fun in a private room instead of the bar. Gu Ning had thought that only her friends from school would come, but she found out that Siti Yi and Chu Xianfeng were also there when she walked in. However, not all of her friends from school showed up today. Only Hao Ran, Mu Ku and Yu Mixi came. When Gu Ning walked inside, Hao Ran and Mu Ku were playing Q Sports, while Chu Pei Han and Yu Mixi were playing darts. "Hi, boss." "Hi, Ning Ning." Seeing Gu Ning coming, Hao Ran, Mu Ku, Yu Mixi and Chu Pei Han all stopped and greeted her. Gu Ning greeted them too, then walked to Siti Yi and Chu Xianfeng who were sitting on the sofa drinking alcohol. "Hi, Situ, Xianfeng." Gu Ning was very at ease, which impressed Chu Xianfeng. In his eyes, Gu Ning was really different from other girls. Chu Xianfeng already knew that Gu Ning knew Siti Yi's identity, because he was told by Siti Yi. Thus he was surprised to see Gu Ning being so calm and relaxed when she faced Siti Yi. There were very few people who weren't afraid of Siti Yi, even Chu Xianfeng felt scared of Siti Yi sometimes. What shocked Chu Xianfeng more was Gu Ning's boyfriend, who was the heir of the Leng family in the capital, and the youngest major general in the military. "Hi, Gu Ning. Come here and have a seat." Chu Xianfeng welcomed her, and poured a glass of wine for her. They didn't like to have fun when there were outsiders around, so there weren't waiters in the private room, and Chu Xianfeng took the responsibility to pour wine. Siti Yi looked at Gu Ning and complained. "I didn't call you, so you never called me. You just sent me a message during the spring festival." Hearing Siti Yi complaining, Chu Xianfeng and Chu Pei Han were both surprised. Since when had their boss become so sensitive? He had changed a lot ever since he had met Gu Ning. Chu Xianfeng understood that Sitiyi liked Gu Ning, so he knew why Sitiyi treated Gu Ning differently. Chu Peihan, on the other hand, had no idea about it, and her dart completely missed the round board because of her astonishment. Yumixi didn't know what was going on, so she felt that it was very strange that Chu Peihan suddenly missed her aim. "Sorry, I was lazy." Gu Ning gave him a perfunctory answer. Sitiyi knew that it was just a perfunctory answer, but he didn't know how to retort. "I sent you a New Year's gift, but you didn't prepare a gift for me?" Sitiyi frowned a little. Hearing that, Chu Xianfeng and Chu Peihan were surprised again. Since when did their boss lack gifts? Fine, Chu Xianfeng realized that his boss didn't lack gifts at all, but he lacked a gift from Gu Ning. Sitiyi didn't care about others' gifts, but all he wanted was Gu Ning's gift. Gu Ning was also surprised. "You're so rich, and do you lack my gift?" Although it was polite to send a gift back, Gu Ning was surprised that Sitiyi would ask for it on his own initiative. "Yes," Sitiyi said with certainty. "Fine, I will give you a gift," Gu Ning said. However, before Sitiyi was cheered up, what Gu Ning said next let him down again. "I'll give a gift to everyone here," Gu Ning added. Sitiyi was upset. A gift for everyone would be meaningless. However, he could do nothing about it. "Will we get a gift too?" "What is it?" Hao Ran and the other people in the room immediately gathered around Gu Ning. They all knew that Gu Ning's gift had to be very special, so they were all curious. Gu Ning took out many porcelain bottles that she had prepared earlier on. There were 3 pills in each of the porcelain bottles. This is a unique medicine, which can cure any diseases, and it's very safe. Gu Ning then told them the effects of the medicine in details. Hao Ran and her other friends had already heard of it when they had been in Su Anya's home, and they had also witnessed it, so they all believed it. Sitiyi and Chu Xianfeng, on the other hand, were quite surprised, and couldn't believe it. "Really?" "Of course. We saw it with our own eyes." Hao Ran opened his mouth before Gu Ning could and told them about what had happened in the Su family's house. Although it wasn't a secret in the high society of City F, not everyone knew the details, especially Chu Xianfeng, who seldom stayed in City F. After Hao Ran's explanation, they started to believe it. Even though they still had doubts, they accepted the gift with pleasure. It wasn't uncommon for them to be injured, so this medicine was exactly what they needed. As for the source of the medicine, none of them asked, although they were all curious about it. After that, they kept on drinking and playing. All of a sudden, a red spot flashed by Gu Ning's eyes. Gu Ning was surprised. And without hesitation, she directly raised her leg, kicking heavily at the nearby sofa. The sofa slid to the side under the force of the kick, and Gu Ning instantly pushed it to stand up at the same time. Before anyone else realized what was going on, a bullet hit the sofa with a clear sound. Seeing the bullet, everyone understood that one of them had been aimed at. Gu Ning looked towards the sniper at once, and the sniper panicked a little before he packed his things and ran away. Chu Peihan and the others were stunned by the scene, while Chu Xianfeng quickly walked to Sitiyi's side. Sitiyi stayed calm, but was furious. None of them were in the mood to have fun after the accident, so they left the clubhouse. "Thank you so much, Gu Ning," Sitiyi said. If it hadn't been for Gu Ning, he would have been killed. People outside didn't know what had happened in the private room, so the others were still enjoying themselves in the clubhouse. After Gu Ning and her friends had left, only Sitiyi and Chu Xianfeng were left in the private room. Sitiyi lay against the sofa with an evil expression, saying in a low voice, "It seems like someone can't wait any longer." Although he didn't have evidence yet, Sitiyi already knew who was behind the attack. In gangs, people schemed against each other even more cruelly than in politics. Once there were conflicts as to benefits or ambit, some would die. Besides, there were plenty of ways not to bear the legal result even if you killed a man in a gang. That was also the reason why so many people were afraid of the gangs, because the gangs weren't restricted by laws. What should we do next? Chu Xianfeng asked. He was displeased too, because he also knew who planned this. Create an accident and get rid of him, Siti ordered. Actually, Siti had planned to turn a blind eye, given that the person was one of the founders of the Qing gang. However, since the person had already schemed to kill him, he wouldn't mind killing a betrayer. Even though he didn't have proof, it was still very easy for Siti to kill a man. Hao Ran and the others walked downstairs in shock and fear. None of them talked about what had just happened. Seeing that Yumixi's face was pale, Muku seemed worried and asked her, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Yumixi forced a smile. Gu Ning gave Muku a glance before she looked to Yumixi. She saw affection in Muku's eyes towards Yumixi, but Yumixi didn't show much love towards Muku. Gu Ning didn't know whether Yumixi just wanted Muku to be her friend or if she didn't realize that they could actually be boyfriend and girlfriend. They were still so young, and had been friends for a long time. Maybe it wasn't easy for both of them to make a step forward. When they were about to walk out of the clubhouse, they met Qin Yifan in the hall. Qin Yifan had an appointment with his friends, and he was a little late. When he saw Gu Ning, he was struck dumb for a second, then wore a gentle smile. "Hi, Gu Ning and everyone. What a coincidence!" Qin Yifan didn't seem sad or helpless now because he had already gotten over it. Even though it still hurt when Gu Ning appeared in his sight, he soon calmed down. "Hi, Yifan." Gu Ning always had a good impression of Qin Yifan, so she treated him as friendly as ever. "Are you going home now?" "It's still early," Qin Yifan said. "Not really. We're going to another place," Gu Ning said. "We gotta go now." "Have fun." "Sure, bye," Qin Yifan said, and they separated. Read latest OVLS at nv/e/l/buy.com. Seeing Gu Ning walking away, Qin Yifan wore a wry smile. His heart still ached for her. It's not even 10 p.m. now. Let's go to V5 bar. I need a drink to calm down, Hao Ran said. All of them looked at Gu Ning, waiting for her opinion. Why not? Gu Ning said. Yay! You're the best boss ever. Chu Peihan exclaimed. Well, you can still go have fun without me, Gu Ning said. Her friends always listened to her. If you're absent, it'll be much less fun, Hao Ran said. Exactly. Qin Zishuan echoed. Unexpectedly, when they had just reached the entrance of V5 bar, they saw drama unfolding. And the roles in the scene were Gu Xiaoxiao, Chen Ziyao, and Qin Jing. Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziyao were pulling and pushing against each other. Qin Jing walked over and pushed Gu Xiaoxiao away. Gu Xiaoxiao, enough! Enough? Gu Xiaoxiao was in a rage. Qin Jing, Chen Ziyao, how dare you do this to me? You're my boyfriend and my best friend. How could you secretly be together behind my back? Hearing that, onlookers looked at Chen Ziyao and Qin Jing with disdain. What? She slept with her best friend's boyfriend? Wow, what a drama! Men always obey their sexual impulses. You hit the point. I think the girl is such a bitch that she stole the man away from her best friend. I agree. People around them were all frequent customers of nightclubs, so they didn't bother to be polite. Chen Ziyao had never been humiliated like that before, and burst into tears at once. Qin Jing, as the boy, stayed strong. Shut up. You don't know the situation, so stop criticizing us. Qin Jing snapped at them, then turned to Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Xiaoxiao, we already broke up, and it's none of your business who I'm with now. Broke up? When? Gu Xiaoxiao questioned. Hearing that, Qin Jing panicked a little. In fact, Qin Jing didn't break up with Gu Xiaoxiao face to face. Gu Xiaoxiao had left City F, and they gradually stopped contacting each other. That being the case, they came to a silent agreement that they broke up with one another. However, when Gu Xiaoxiao found out that Qin Jing became Chen Xiao's boyfriend, she couldn't accept it and felt like she had been betrayed. That was the cause of the scene. Even though Qin Jing didn't break up with Gu Xiaoxiao face to face, he wouldn't admit it in order to protect his image. Gu Xiaoxiao, we broke up already, that's the reason why we didn't call each other at all recently. Have you ever seen a couple who doesn't contact each other for a month? Gu Xiaoxiao was mad, but didn't know how to argue back, because what Qin Jing had said was the truth. Her reaction was also caught by those onlookers, and they started to despise Gu Xiaoxiao now. Oh, so the bitch is this girl? She's so shameless to come on to the boy after they have already broken up. Exactly. She made us judge the other girl. Gu Xiaoxiao was irritated, but didn't know how to argue back. Xiao, let's go. Qin Jing held Chen Xiao's hand walking away. From the beginning to the end, Chen Xiao didn't say a word because she wanted to see Qin Jing's attitude and also wanted to protect her image. No. Gu Xiaoxiao immediately went to pull Qin Jing back. She had already humiliated herself in public, so she wasn't willing to give up. She wanted them to apologize. Just as Gu Xiaoxiao touched Qin Jing's hand, Qin Jing flung her to the ground and left right away. Gu Ning and her friends went into the bar after the drama ended. Gu Ning wasn't interested in laughing at Gu Xiaoxiao now. Chu Peihan actually wanted to do that, but she didn't say anything since Gu Ning had no interest. They went to a private room, drinking and chatting to the music. Mu Ke poured a glass of water for Yu Mixi, which attracted everyone else's attention. Mu Ke instantly explained. Mixi isn't good at drinking, so I think that it's better for her to drink water. Yu Mixi didn't think that there was anything wrong with that. I'm not good at drinking either, Chu Peihan said and teased. Let me pour some water for you, Mu Ke said, and was going to do that, but was stopped by Chu Peihan. All right, I don't like drinking water when I'm having alcohol. It's uncomfortable. At that moment, everyone started to realize that Mu Ke treated Yu Mixi differently. However, Yu Mixi apparently didn't know, so they didn't point it out in case it would cause unnecessary trouble. Oh, Mixi, did your uncles and aunts harass you again? Gu Ning asked. Mu Ke also looked at Yu Mixi with concern. They did twice, but we called the police so they disappeared, Yu Mixi said. Good to know, Gu Ning said. After a while, Haoran checked his phone and exclaimed in surprise, "What the F *CK? What?" The others were all curious why Haoran was so surprised. Read this. Haoran showed his phone to the others, and there was a piece of shocking news on the screen. A boy and two girls fought in public because of an emotional entanglement. One girl was pushed by the other into the middle of the road and was hit by a car, photo attached. In the photo, lying 2 meters in front of a white car was a girl dressed in white. Half of her face was covered in blood, and it was very likely that her face was damaged. The girl was Chen Xiao. From what the title said, the other girl had to be Gu Xiaoxiao who had pushed Chen Xiao. Everyone was shocked that Gu Xiaoxiao would do that. However, nobody cared about Chen Xiao because none of them liked her. Well, I think that Gu Xiaoxiao is going to jail this time, Chu Peihan said, but didn't have any sympathy at all. Actually, what Gu Xiaoxiao had done to Gu Ning the last time was already enough to send her to jail. She dug her own grave, Hao Ran said. They weren't affected by this accident and kept on drinking and chatting. Gu Xiaoxiao was selfish, cruel and evil, so she didn't care about the consequences and set herself to get revenge. After the accident, someone immediately called the ambulance and the police. The ambulance and the police arrived at almost the same time, and Chen Xiao, followed by Qin Zheng, was sent to the hospital, while Gu Xiaoxiao was taken to the police station. The police and the hospital then called Gu Xiaoxiao's and Chen Xiao's parents separately. After receiving the terrible news, Chen Xiao's parents ran to the hospital, while Gu Xiaoxiao's parents ran to the police station without delay. Qin Zheng had mixed emotions, not because of Chen Xiao, but because he was worried about whether this accident would affect himself. He was selfish too. Once the ambulance arrived at the hospital, Chen Xiao was rushed into the emergency room. Although it needed her parents' signature to perform surgery, Chen Xiao's father Chen Langwei told them to perform the surgery right away, because they weren't sure whether Chen Xiao could hang on until they arrived. The hospital also knew that Chen Xiao's father was an important figure, so they performed the surgery at once. After Chen Xiao's parents found out the entire process of the accident, they were so mad that they almost punched Qin Zheng. If it hadn't been for Qin Zheng, Gu Xiaoxiao wouldn't have pushed Chen Xiao into the middle of the road. However, Qin Zheng's father was the vice director of the tourism administration, so Chen Xiao's parents didn't dare to hurt him. Instead, they made up their minds to make Gu Xiaoxiao bear the result, even though they had a good relationship with Gu Qinxiang. Gu Qinxiang, Lin Lijuan and Gu Qingyun also arrived at the police station later. After finding out the whole process, they were also mad at Gu Xiaoxiao's behavior. To their astonishment, Gu Xiaoxiao dared to kill a girl at her age. And it wasn't the first time that Gu Xiaoxiao had tried to hurt another girl. All test NOVL on novelben/.cm. Gu Xiaoxiao had successfully gotten away with what she had done before, so she didn't taste the feeling of fear until she ended up in the police station. Seeing Gu Qinxiang and Lin Lijuan coming, she burst into tears. "Dad, Mom, get me out. Qinxiang, do something. Get Xiaoxiao out." Lin Lijuan only knew how to show off in front of her relatives, but had no idea how to deal with difficulties. Gu Qinxiang understood that Gu Xiaoxiao would be sentenced to years in jail if he failed to handle it well, so he called Chen Xiao's father to apologize and discuss the compensation. He almost begged Chen Xiao's father to treat it as an accident, instead of an intentional assault. In that case, Gu Xiaoxiao wouldn't be put in jail. Chen Xiao's father said, "Gu Qinxiang, the compensation doesn't matter at all, but I will throw your daughter in jail." After that, he hung up on Gu Qinxiang. "How is it? How is it?" Lin Lijuan was anxious. Chen Langwei said that he's going to throw Xiaoxiao in jail, Gu Qinxiang said in despair. "What?" Lin Lijuan was shocked and almost fell onto the ground. Luckily, Gu Qingyun, who stood behind her, supported her on time. "Dad, I don't want to be put in jail. Please help me out." Gu Xiaoxiao cried in fear when she heard that she could end up in jail. "You don't want to be put in jail? Why didn't you think about the consequences before you pushed Xiao into the road?" Gu Qinxiang snapped at her. He was so mad and disappointed that he almost beat Gu Xiaoxiao. "What should we do now? We can't let Xiaoxiao be put in jail." Lin Lijuan asked. "What can I do?" Chen Langwei refused to settle it out of court, and it wasn't an accident after all. Gu Qinxiang lost his patience. He also had no idea how to handle it right now. "Oh, call Gu Man. Doesn't she know Mrs. Hao? It's very easy for the Hao family to protect Xiaoxiao." Lin Lijuan thought of Gu Man all of a sudden and told Gu Qinxiang to call her. Although Gu Qinxiang didn't think that Gu Man would be willing to help him, he still called her because there was nothing else he could do. Gu Man thought that Gu Qingxiang was calling to borrow money, but she still answered his call in case he had something else to talk to her about. After Gu Man heard what Gu Xiaoxiao had done, she was astonished too. However, she rejected Gu Qingxiang's request without hesitation. "Gu Man, do you have to be so cold-blooded?" Gu Qingxiang was in a rage. "You already refused to lend me money, but how can you stand aside when Xiaoxiao is in trouble?" It seemed that it was all Gu Man's fault in his eyes. Gu Man was also furious, and yelled angrily, "Gu Qingxiang, do you know how shameless and selfish your family is? Gu Xiaoxiao committed a crime and she should take responsibility for it. When she turned to her cousin trying to hurt Ningning last time, she should have been put in jail already. We didn't sue her, just because she's a relative. It's insane to think that the Hao family will help a criminal." After that, Gu Man directly hung up on Gu Qingxiang. Gu Qingxiang was so annoyed that he almost smashed his phone. "How is it? Did she agree?" Although Lin Lijuan already had the answer from Gu Qingxiang's reaction, she still couldn't accept it. From her perspective, Gu Man had to help them. After hanging up on Gu Qingxiang, Gu Man went to tell Gu Qing and her family who lived next door what Gu Xiaoxiao had done. All test NOVL on novelben/.cm. Gu Qing and Jiang Su were also stunned, but neither of them had sympathy for Gu Xiaoxiao. They didn't know the specific reason for the conflict which caused Gu Xiaoxiao to push the girl into the middle of a road, but Gu Xiaoxiao had already committed the crime of intentional assault. As long as Chen Xiao's parents weren't willing to forgive her, she would be put in jail. They definitely had no sympathy for a criminal, especially after what Gu Xiaoxiao had done to Gu Ning before. Therefore, when Gu Qingxiang called Gu Qing and Jiang Su later, neither of them answered his call, which irritated Gu Qingxiang, but he could do nothing about it. Nevertheless, he didn't want to give up, and called Gu Qingyang later. He tried to get Gu Qingyang to help him persuade Gu Man. Gu Qingyang was also greatly surprised after hearing the shocking news. He hesitated for a while before he rejected Gu Qingxiang, because Gu Xiaoxiao had already committed the crime and he hated those who wanted to get away with a crime more since he was a public servant himself. Ever since he had found out what Gu Xiaoxiao had done to Gu Ning the last time, he had the worst impression of Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Qingxiang spoiled his children rotten, and that was why they were so law-defying. At the same time, Gu Qingyang also realized that he had to teach his own children well and never allow them to behave like Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Qingxiang swore at Gu Qingyang but couldn't do anything about it either. In the end, he had to go to the hospital and apologize to Chen Xiao's parents in person. Unfortunately, Chen Xiao's parents still refused to settle it out of court, and Gu Qingxiang could only hire the best lawyer he could afford to see whether the lawyer could change something. Although Gu Qingyang rejected Gu Qingxiang, he called Gu Qing later and told her about it. Gu Qing said to him seriously, "Maybe you think that we're cold-blooded, but we did it for a good reason. We didn't sue Gu Xiaoxiao last time after what she did to Ningning, but she won't reflect on herself. If she doesn't need to bear the consequences of her own terrible behavior, she won't learn from it. Luckily, you called me. Instead of Man would feel hurt if you call her and brought it up again. You know Ningning is very successful now. If you really treat us as your family, we'll help you if you have any problems in the future." "I understand," Gu Qingyang said. He definitely knew that Gu Ning had the ability to get rid of him, so he didn't dare to annoy her. He also felt lucky that he hadn't intentionally hurt Gu Man and Gu Ning, even though he had also despised them before. In addition, Gu Ning was willing to forgive them. Gu Qingyang and his wife were just common public servants without any power or much money after all. Chen Xiao was injured on her face, and her legs were broken too. She could have plastic surgery to repair her face, but she wouldn't be able to stand anymore. That being the case, her parents were determined to throw Gu Xiaoxiao in jail. Gu Ning and her friends didn't follow the news, and they didn't leave the bar until it was nearly 12 p.m. "Mu Ku, Would you please send Mixie home? Gu Ning asked. She wouldn't interfere in their personal affairs, but she was willing to create a chance for them so that they could be alone for a while. And it was totally up to them whether they could move a step forward. No problem. Muku of course wouldn't reject, but he was very nervous, because he knew that Gu Ning must have found out about his fondness towards Mixie. Mixie, on the other hand, had no idea about it, so she agreed to let Muku send her home, and they got in a taxi. Seeing Muku and Mixie leaving in the taxi, Hao Ran wore a smile and said, "Boss, are you creating chances for them?" Although it was a question, he already knew the answer was affirmative. I don't think Mixie knows about Muku's feelings towards her. I do hope that they can be together, Chu Peihan said. They were so young right now, and it was too far away for them to get married or have a family, so none of them knew what would happen in the future. If Muku and Mixie's relationship failed, one of them could leave their team, because it was rare to see a couple be friends again after breaking up with each other. Whatever will be, Gu Ning said. The future was full of changes and plans could never catch up with change, so it was better that they go with the flow. Although Mixie didn't know that Muku admired her, she felt a little uneasy and shy when she was alone with him. Muku was handsome and gentle. Mixie would be lying if she said that she had no affection towards him, but she also knew the abyss between them, so she never allowed herself to imagine their future. On the way, the two barely talked. However, when they arrived, Muku followed Mixie in getting out of the car and walked her to the stairs. "Thanks," Mixie said. "My pleasure." "Good night," Muku said gently. Mixie's heart skipped a beat when Muku said good night to her, because it was the first time that a boy had said that to her like that. "Good night," Mixie replied, before she walked upstairs. Muku didn't leave until Mixie's back disappeared from his sight. When Gu Ning got home, Gu Man was still awake. Gu Ning knew that her mother was in a bad mood at a glance. "Mom, what's wrong?" Gu Ning asked with concern. Gu Man then told Gu Ning what had happened to Gu Xiao. Gu Ning had already heard about it, so she wasn't surprised. However, to her astonishment, Gu Qingxiang would actually call Gu Man and even wanted the Hao family to help Gu Xiao out, which was totally insane. "Just ignore him, and we won't be involved in this mess." "Gu Xiao deserves it," Gu Ning said. She didn't tell Gu Man the details, because they didn't care. After a short while, Gu Ning's phone rang, and the caller was Leng Xiaoting. It's already past 12 a.m., so Leng Xiaoting called her to wish her happy Lantern Festival. Because Gu Man hadn't gone to bed yet, Gu Ning didn't talk with Leng Xiaoting on the phone for a long time, in case Gu Man would have doubts. The next day was the Lantern Festival. The capital, in the Ling family's old house. Master Ling got up early that morning, and felt relaxed as well as energetic. He knew that it was the great effects of the pill that Leng Xiaoting had given him yesterday, and was quite surprised. Master Ling kept complimenting Gu Ning in front of Leng Xiaoting, which made Leng Xiaoting feel extremely satisfied. Leng Xiaoting wouldn't be as happy even if his grandpa praised him. Afterwards, Master Ling called Master Jiang at once. He couldn't wait to show off in front of his old friend, but he didn't tell Master Jiang that the pills were from Gu Ning. Instead, he only told Master Jiang that he got a special medicine which was good for his health. Master Jiang, however, was worried. "Ling, are you sure the pill is safe? It sounds very abnormal." Master Jiang didn't want Master Ling to be deceived. "Of course it's safe. I'm not dumb," Master Ling retorted. "I indeed feel relaxed, comfortable and energetic now. I used to feel tired after walking for just a dozen minutes, but I walked for half an hour in my yard this morning and didn't feel tired at all. In addition, I have a great appetite now." "Really?" Master Jiang doubted it, but was also curious. He had never heard of it before, so he didn't believe it. At the same time, he also knew that there were so many things that he had never heard of. Therefore, he was quite curious. "Why would I lie to you?" Master Ling said. He was a little mad and disappointed because he simply wanted to show off, but his friend thought that it wasn't normal. "Fine, forget it." After that, he hung up. Master Ling had planned to call Master Su in the beginning, but he gave up on that now, because his good mood was already ruined by Master Jiang. Master Ling's family was also curious about why he suddenly became so energetic with a great appetite, but none of them knew the reason, because Master Ling wouldn't tell them. In City F, Gu Ning went to do grocery shopping with Gu Qing and Gu Man in the morning. They had spent the New Year festival at Gu Man's, so they decided to spend the Lantern Festival at Gu Qing's. Once they were out, Gu Ning sensed that someone was secretly staring at them, and she instantly knew who it was. Is he still here? He didn't go home for the Lantern Festival? Gu Ning thought to herself. Suddenly, Gu Ning felt sorry for him. She also had the impulse to invite him to spend the Lantern Festival with them, but it was obviously not the right time. In Gu Qingxiang's home, it was the worst Lantern Festival that they had ever had because of what had happened to Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Qingxiang had turned to a lawyer for advice on Gu Xiaoxiao's lawsuit early that morning, but the lawyer's answer was that Gu Xiaoxiao was doomed to be put in jail as long as the Chen family wasn't willing to settle it out of court. Besides, Gu Xiaoxiao would be sentenced to at least 3 years in jail according to the injury she had caused. Hearing the answer, Gu Qingxiang knew that it was hopeless, but he still did his best trying to get a lighter sentence for Gu Xiaoxiao. Chao Wenxin's family went to spend the Lantern Festival at her aunt's today, and they set off right after breakfast. However, the moment that Chao Wenxin walked inside, she was stunned when she noticed the man sitting on the sofa. Xin Bei. Why is he here? The man sitting on the sofa was Xin Bei. Xin Bei said that he was going to visit his uncle, but he appears here. Is it possible? My uncle is his uncle too. Jesus! How is it possible? Chao Wenxin almost went crazy, especially when she thought of what had happened on the plane yesterday. And she really wanted to run away right now. Xin Bei was also stunned when Chao Wenxin showed up. Unexpectedly, Chao Wenxin was the daughter of his aunt's younger brother. Thinking of what had happened on the plane yesterday, Xin Bei felt uneasy too, so he directly turned his head away from her, pretending that he didn't know her. Wenxin, come on in. Let me introduce you. This is my cousin, Xin Bei. A man who was around 30 years old, standing by Xin Bei's side, said to Chao Wenjun and Chao Wenxin, then turned to Xin Bei. They're my cousins too, Chao Wenjun and Chao Wenxin. The man who introduced them to each other was named Xin Chen. He was the son of Xin Bei's uncle as well as the son of Chao Wenjun and Chao Wenxin's uncle. Visit en Velben, cm for you ovals. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Xin Bei greeted Chao Wenjun, but ignored Chao Wenxin. Luckily, no one noticed that except for themselves. Chin, where is Wei? Chao Wenxin couldn't stay there for a second longer, so she could only turn to talking with her cousin's wife. She is upstairs with the child. Xin Chen said. Oh, I'll go find her. Saying that, Chao Wenxin quickly ran upstairs, like she was escaping away. Xin Chen and Chao Wenjun felt like Chao Wenxin was different today, but didn't think further. The men sat down together then, starting to chat. Xin Chen worked in politics, Xin Bei served in the army, and Chao Wenjun was a police officer. Among them, Xin Bei had the greatest achievement, but his identity towards outsiders was just a lieutenant colonel of a certain military region. Only a few people knew that he was a member of the Red Flame because it was highly confidential. Chao Wenjun had already heard of Xianbei from Xianchen and he admired Xianbei very much, but this was the first time that they had met each other because of varied reasons. Join our Discord https://discord.gg/6vfcq@. Xianbei, I think you're old enough to have a girlfriend now. What do you think of Wenxin? Xianchen suddenly said to Xianbei. Actually, Xianchen had the intention to introduce Xianbei to Chao Wenxin today at the Lantern Festival. In Xianchen's eyes, Xianbei was an achiever, and Chao Wenxin was also a good girl. They would be a great match. Of course, all that Xianchen could do was simply introduce them to one another, and it was totally up to them whether they would be together. Xianbei was struck dumb for a second and had mixed emotions at that moment. Facing Chao Wenxin, he wasn't sure about his feelings towards her. He didn't like her, nor hated her very much, and didn't think they got along well after what had happened between them. You don't need to worry about me. I think that I'll find my girl at the right time. Xianbei didn't deny Xianchen's advice directly, but it wasn't an affirmative answer either. Since Xianbei said so, Xianchen didn't say anything further, but Chao Wenjun was slightly disappointed, because he hoped that his sister could be together with Xianbei. Nonetheless, Chao Wenjun also thought that they had just met for the first time, and it was hard to tell at such an early stage. Meanwhile, Chao Wenjun planned to invite them to have fun together after dinner, so that Xianbei would have more chances to get along with Chao Wenxin. What Chao Wenjun didn't know was that Xianbei and Chao Wenxin had actually already met each other many times. Chao Wenxin tried to avoid Xianbei, so she went to find her cousin's wife. Unexpectedly, her cousin's wife, Xiao Wei, went downstairs later, so Chao Wenxin had to go back to the living room too. What was worse, Xiao Wei directly sat with the men, and Chao Wenxin had nowhere to hide. Wenxin, come here, Xiao Wei said to her. In order to not let others find out anything unusual, Chao Wenxin forced herself to go over and sit with them. However, she then kept playing with the 2-year-old kid to avoid meeting Xianbei's eyes. Xianbei also turned away from Chao Wenxin and kept chatting with Chao Wenjun and Xianchen. In others' eyes, it seemed like the two disliked each other. Even so, Chao Wenjun still wanted to conduct his plan for tonight. After dinner, Chao Wenxin thought that she could finally leave, but Chao Wenjun proposed to have a walk and appreciate the lanterns together. Can I not go with you? Chao Wenxin asked. She really didn't want to spend another minute with Xianbei. Somehow, Xianbei was a little disappointed when Chao Wenxin rejected going out with him. Don't you love doing stuff? Why not? Chao Wenjun frowned a little. Wenxin, go have some fun with your cousins. You don't have anything else to do if you go home alone, Tang Yunrong said. Wenxin, I'll go too. You won't be the only girl. Xiao Wei thought that Chao Wenxin was being shy to go alone with the men. Chao Wenxin opened her mouth, but didn't know how to reject them because it would be very unusual if she insisted not to go with them. Fine. Let's go. Chao Wenxin compromised. Seeing Chao Wenxin being so unwilling, Xianbei felt uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. Xianchen was the driver, Xiao Wei sat in the passenger seat, while Xianbei and Chao Wenxin sat behind with Chao Wenjun in the middle. On the way, Chao Wenxin never spoke on her own initiative, which was completely not her style. Therefore, the others in the car immediately sensed that something was different, but none of them knew that Xianbei was the cause. Wenxin, what happened to you? You didn't talk to us at all today, which is quite unusual, Xianchen said. I have nothing to say, Chao Wenxin said. Just ignore me, please. Xianchen, however, wouldn't ignore her. I heard that you visited the capital the other day? Yes, Chao Wenxin said. Geht the L Testvels on no/v/elben, c/om. Did you have fun? Xin Chen asked. Chao Wenxin stopped for a second before she said, I did when I was happy, but didn't when I wasn't. Chao Wenxin intentionally stressed the words when she said she hadn't had fun when she had been unhappy. She was picking on Xin Bei, and Xin Bei knew it. Xin Bei was a little mad, because she wasn't the only one who had been unhappy. When they had met for the first time, she had thrown coffee in his face and had told others that he was a terrible man. When they had met the second time, she had hit him with the cue stick. When they had met the third time, she had poured coffee on him again and had even injured his penis. Xin Bei thought that he was the one who had the right to be unhappy. What happened during your journey? Xiao Wei asked. I met a terrible man, Chao Wenxin suddenly blurted out. She regretted it immediately after she said it, but it was too late to take it back. A terrible man? Xin Bei couldn't tolerate it anymore, and turned to look at Chao Wenxin in annoyance. The others in the car immediately realized that there must be something that had happened between them that they didn't know about. Am I wrong? I accidentally hit him once, and he intentionally knocked into me, Chao Wenxin said. Xin Bei was amused, and asked, Really? So who threw coffee in my face before she even knew the situation, and who hit me with the cue stick on purpose? Who poured coffee on me again yesterday and even injured? Xin Bei suddenly stopped, because he felt embarrassed to say that in public. Fine, I know it was a misunderstanding when we met for the first time, but how about the other things you've done to me? You, Chao Wenxin didn't know what to say. Hearing that, everyone else knew that the two had already met each other before and had many conflicts. If they had conflicts, it would be difficult for Chao Wenjun to achieve his goal. If you dare criticize me again, I'll tell Ningning, and my brother-in-law will help me punish you, Chao Wenxin threatened. Find new stories on nov/elbin.com. Xin Bei was stunned this time. All right, stop arguing now, Xin Chen said to Xin Bei. Although Chao Wenxin was being a little aggressive, she was a girl after all. Do you think that I'm the one who is wrong? I didn't say anything in the beginning. It was her who started to blame me, Xin Bei said in annoyance. Xin Chen opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Xin Bei also closed his mouth. He would stay quiet as long as Chao Wenxin stopped picking on him. Oh, Wenxin, who is your brother-in-law? Chao Wenjun asked with curiosity. Since when do you have a brother-in-law? Ningning's boyfriend, of course, Chao Wenxin said. Gu Ning? Chao Wenjun was surprised. Isn't she just 18 years old? She already has a boyfriend? Although Chao Wenjun hadn't met Gu Ning yet, he had heard a lot about her, and he admired her very much. Yes. He's extraordinarily handsome and outstanding, Chao Wenxin complimented. Ningning made a good choice. Xin Bei thought to himself that his boss was, of course, extraordinarily outstanding, and there were few people who were comparable to his boss in this world. Chao Wenjun also believed that Gu Ning's boyfriend had to be very excellent, but she was only 18 years old. Does Grandpa know that Gu Ning has a boyfriend? Of course. They already met each other, Chao Wenxin said. Since their grandfather was already aware of it, Chao Wenjun wasn't worried anymore. After that, they arrived at an ancient street with many old buildings. Although the buildings had been repaired and rebuilt many years ago, they still kept the historical style. It was the Lantern Festival, so the street was already full of activity and was ablaze with exquisite lanterns hanging on both sides. If the visitors hadn't been wearing modern clothing, they would have thought that they had transmigrated to the past. There were lantern shows everywhere in different sizes, so Gu Ning along with Gu Man and Gu Qing's family went to appreciate the lanterns tonight. The lantern show in City F was set at Qingjiang Square, which was the same place that the fireworks show had taken place. Hao Ran and his friends came here too. Except for Zhang Tianping and Chu Peihan who were alone, the rest came here with their families. Gu Qing and Gu Man were friends of Hao Ran's mother, and they already had an appointment to appreciate lanterns together, so Gu Man called Hao Ran's mother once they arrived at Qingjiang Square. They were also in the parking lot, so they met each other soon. Mrs. Lu's family also came here with Hao Ran's family. Mrs. Lu's husband was Lu Zijin, and they had a 13-year-old daughter named Lu Yixiao. Mrs. Hao introduced them to each other, and they were busy greeting one another in the following minutes. After that, Hao Zhonglong purposely introduced Gu Ning to Lu Zijin. Zijin, this is the real boss of the most popular jewelry store in City F, Gu Ning. Hao Zhonglong respected and appreciated Gu Ning very much, because she had achieved a lot at such a young age. Hearing that, Lu Zijin was greatly surprised. He had, of course, heard the story of Gu Ning, but he had been busy that day when Miss Su had held her birthday party, so he hadn't met Gu Ning until now. "Miss Gu, so nice to meet you," Lu Zijin said politely. He didn't show any disdain just because she was young. Instead, he treated her like she was one of his peers and also complimented her right in front of others. "Miss Gu is really an outstandingly successful young businesswoman." "Thank you so much for your compliment, Mr. Lu," Gu Ning said politely. She wasn't proud, nor was she self-abased, but had a natural air of an achiever, which impressed Lu Zijin more. "I'm so envious of Gu Man that she has such an outstanding daughter. I wish my son could be half as successful as Gu Ning," Mrs. Hao said. "Mom, do you have to show your dislike towards your own son in front of everyone?" Hao Ran complained. "Show me your ability and I won't do it again," Mrs. Hao said. "Fine," Hao Ran said with a sad face. "All right, let's go inside," Hao Zhonglong said, and a group of them walked inside. Tang Yunfan was following them along the way. Seeing that other families were so happy together, while Gu Man was alone and Gu Ning's father was absent, Tang Yunfan's heart ached, and he had an impulse to run forward and have a reunion with them, but it would be irresponsible if he suddenly showed up like that before he regained his memory. He didn't want Gu Man to face a man who had completely forgotten her, because she would be hurt deeply. At the same time, he was also afraid that he would never regain his memory. In that case, he wouldn't be able to have a family reunion even though his wife and daughter were right in front of his eyes, which was torture for him too. Therefore, Tang Yunfan gave himself a deadline. If he failed to gain his memory back within a month, he would directly show up in front of Gu Man and Gu Ning to take the duty of a husband as well as a father. Gu Man also felt sad that she couldn't give Gu Ning a complete family. Gu Ning sensed Gu Man's sadness, so she held her hand to comfort her. Gu Man soon relaxed because of Gu Ning's comfort. She had lived her life like that for the past 18 years, and it was meaningless to think about it right now. After a while, they met in Guangyao and an Yi. And Guangyao stood by Gu Ning's left side, and Gu Ning was introducing him to Gu Man. They were chatting happily, but Tang Yunfan couldn't hear their talk from where he was. He suddenly felt a sense of crisis, because they looked so harmonious together. Who is the man? What's his relationship with them? Tang Yunfan didn't know what he should do if Gu Man already had a man that she liked. Although he hadn't regained his memory yet, he knew that Gu Man and Gu Ning were his wife and daughter, and he was reluctant to see Gu Man being with another man. However, if Gu Man felt happy with the man, he had no right to interfere, because he had been absent for the past 18 years, and hadn't taken care of Gu Ning for a single day. After a while, Gu Ning received Chu Peihan's call. A few minutes later, she and Zhang Tianping joined them. Now, only Qin Zixuan, Su Anya and Yu Mixi were absent. Gu Ning took a selfie when she was in the middle of beautiful, bright lanterns and sent it to Leng Xiaoting. At this time, Leng Xiaoting was playing chess with his grandfather. He checked his phone immediately when he heard the sound of the new message. He had set a special sound for Gu Ning's messages and calls, so he would know that the message was from her the moment he heard the sound. When Leng Xiaoting read the message and saw Gu Ning's smiling face in the photo, there was a gentle smile on his lips too, which shocked Master Leng. Since when had his grandson learned how to smile? Master Leng immediately realized that the message must be sent from Gu Ning. Master Leng was curious, and approached Leng Xiaoting trying to have a peep. Unexpectedly, Leng Xiaoting discovered him and instantly drew his phone back. "Go away," Leng Xiaoting said lightly and gave Master Leng a cold look. "You young brat," Master Leng was annoyed, but couldn't do anything about it. He didn't want Leng Xiaoting to be mad at him, or he would have gotten someone to investigate the girl already. "I don't want to play anymore." Master Leng lost interest. "Fine, I'll go back to my room then." Leng Xiaoting stood up at once. He didn't care to play chess at all and left without hesitation. Master Leng was astonished. His grandson really chose his girlfriend over his grandfather. In fact, Master Leng never felt like Leng Xiaoting cherished him because Leng Xiaoting had been busy with tasks before, and now he was busy dating his girlfriend. However, Master Leng accepted it soon, because he also hoped that his grandson could be happy. Leng Xiaoting sent a message back to Gu Ning the moment he went back to his room. "Leng Xiaoting, Ning, are you seducing me?" When Gu Ning read his message, she struck dumb for a second. "What?" "Gu Ning, I'm not." "Leng Xiaoting, you alone are a seduction to me." Reading the words, Gu Ning flushed, and replied, "Since when have you become so horny?" "Leng Xiaoting, since the moment you turned me on." Leng Xiaoting put it plainly. Gu Ning breathed hard, and suddenly doubted whether the person who was texting with her was really Leng Xiaoting, because she couldn't believe that those words were typed down by him. "Gu Ning, are you shouting?" Leng Xiaoting was also struck dumb for a second when he read Gu Ning's message, and soon figured it out and called Gu Ning at once. Seeing Leng Xiaoting's call, Gu Ning answered it without delay. "Ning," Leng Xiaoting called her. "I wondered if someone was playing on your phone," Gu Ning said, but still felt shy when she thought of what Leng Xiaoting had just texted her. "It's impossible that I'd let others play on my phone, unless it's you, because I'm willing to give you my everything," Leng Xiaoting said with affection. Gu Ning's heart was pounding fast. All right. It's too noisy here, I'll call you back when I'm home." After that, Gu Ning hung up. Although they had already slept together, Gu Ning still felt shy to talk to him about it. Leng Xiaoting smiled resignedly when he heard the busy signal on the phone, but he didn't mind, because he knew that she was hanging out with her family, and he also had no intention to bother her. In City B, Chao Wenxin and Xian Bei had another conflict again after a short wall of silence, simply because a stand owner selling sky lanterns mistook them for a couple and persuaded them to buy one. Find up Tedovals on n/v/elben.co/m. They disliked each other very much, and were both mad when others thought that they were a couple. Chao Wenxin said with disdain, "Hey, what's wrong with your eyes? We are not a couple. I hate men like him." Xian Bei also retorted with intense dislike, "What? I don't think you're capable of judging others, given that you're so rude and unkind." Hearing that, Chao Wenxin was irritated. "What did you say? I'm rude and unkind? Don't forget you're the terrible man." "I'm a terrible man?" Xian Bei was amused. He thought that he really should stay away from Chao Wenxin, because they always had conflicts whenever they were together. "Fine, I don't want to argue with you, nor play the blame game. I think we better keep a distance from each other." After that, he stood aside. "Wenxin, I think you're being a little too much. Since when have you become so impolite? Chao Wenjun criticized. Chao Wenxin didn't know how to explain, because she knew that she did it impulsively. After a while, they went to drink tea at a nearby tea house. Hey, I'm sorry. Can we just drop it? Chao Wenxin reflected on herself and realized that it was her fault. Although she disliked him, he was her relative, and there was no need for them to argue every time. Therefore, she poured a cup of tea for Xianbei in person and apologized to him. Xianbei also wasn't mean, so he wouldn't bring it up as long as she didn't say it. Since Chao Wenxin apologized to him on her own initiative, he accepted it and drank the tea she had poured for him, which was the sign of reconciliation. They didn't hang out for long, and went back home when it was almost 11 p.m. Xianchen drove Chao Wenjun and Chao Wenxin home first before he went back to the Xian family's house with Xianbei. Xianchen and the others had left. Chao Wenjun asked Chao Wenxin, "Why do you hate Xianbei so much?" Chao Wenxin didn't hide the truth and told her older brother everything, but she omitted the accident where she had hit Xianbei's penis on the plane because it was really embarrassing. Hearing what had happened between them, Chao Wenjun was mad about her behavior, because she was the one who should be blamed, but she instead blamed Xianbei for everything. Xianchen also asked Xianbei what had happened between him and Chao Wenxin. Xianbei told him the truth too, and he also omitted the accident where Chao Wenxin had hit his penis on the plane. Well, I know that she usually isn't a rude girl. Maybe you two just don't get along. I think that you should just let it go. Xianchen didn't want to blame Xianbei anymore, but persuaded him to let it go. When Chao Wenjun and Chao Wenxin got home, Tang Yinrong asked Chao Wenxin, "Xian, what do you think of Xianbei?" Mrs. Xian and Tang Yinrong had talked a lot about Xianbei and Chao Wenxin in the Xian family's house right after they had gone out together to have fun. Tang Yinrong was very satisfied with Xianbei. Although they weren't snobbish people, they of course would choose a family which was at the same level as their own family if they had choices. Even though Xianbei's family wasn't very rich, Xianbei was very outstanding, and it was rare to see such a young lieutenant colonel like him. No opinions, Chao Wenxin said airily. Find you chapters on nv/lbi.com. What do you mean? Do you like him or not? Tang Yinrong asked. Like him or not? Chao Wenxin was surprised by her mother's question, but soon realized her mother's intention. Mom, we don't get along. Insane. Tang Yinrong glared at her in annoyance. How come you don't get along? You just met each other for the first time. Mom, it's fine. Just let them go with the flow, Chao Wenjun immediately interrupted them. Tang Yinrong still wanted to say something, but Chao Wenxin went directly into her room. Clearly, she didn't want to hear another word about Xianbei. In her eyes, it was impossible for her to be together with Xianbei, because they argued all the time. However, thinking of what had happened on the plane, Chao Wenxin's heart pounded fast and her face flushed. She had never encountered anything more embarrassing than that yet. Mrs. Xian also couldn't wait to ask Xianbei's impression of Chao Wenxin the moment they were home. Xianchen and Xiao Wei gave their mother a resigned look. Before Xianbei could say a word, Xianchen opened his mouth. Mom, just let it be what it'll be. Saying that, Xianchen winked at his mother, and Mrs. Xian instantly understood that it didn't go well. Nonetheless, when Xianbei was alone in his room, he couldn't help thinking about the question his aunt had asked him. What do you think of Chao Wenxin? Actually, there was nothing bad about Chao Wenxin. She was pretty and full of a sense of justice. Unfortunately, they always argued, so it wasn't a good thing if they were together. The next morning, after Gu Man left for work, Gu Ning called Tang Yinfan. Gu Ning had no intention to let Tang Yinfan secretly stare at them all the time. Since Tang Yinfan was paying special attention to Gu Man, it meant that he was willing to go back to her side, but he just had his worries. Gu Ning thought that it was acceptable that Tang Yinfan took it as a long-term plan that he was going to face Gu Man one day, but she could lay her cards on the table beforehand. Because she had never spent time with Tang Yinfan, there was no pain from feelings for him to have to relieve. Tang Yinfan was quite surprised when Gu Ning called him, but he didn't know that Gu Ning had already discovered him. "Hi," Tang Yinfan said gently. He didn't sound as cold as usual. "Hi, Uncle Tang." Before Gu Ning laid her cards on the table, she decided to call him her uncle for now. "I know that you're in City F now and that you've been following my mother for a couple of days. Can we talk?" Hearing that, Tang Yinfan's body stiffened in shock. To his astonishment, Gu Ning had already discovered him. He was a little worried that Gu Ning would mistake his aim. Sure. Since Gu Ning had already discovered him, Tang Yinfan thought that it was better for him to meet her. "Great. Can you come to my home?" Gu Ning said. She didn't bother to tell him the address, because he already knew it. Gu Man was out for work, so Tang Yinfan agreed to meet Gu Ning at her home. When Tang Yinfan walked towards Gu Ning's home, he was getting more and more nervous, even though Gu Man wasn't home. A dozen minutes later, the bell rang, and Gu Ning went to open the door. Seeing Tang Yinfan, Gu Ning stayed calm. "Uncle Tang, please come in." Tang Yinfan walked inside and glanced around Gu Ning's home, which was warmly decorated. He felt at home even though it was the first time that he had walked into this place. His wife and daughter lived here, which made him feel relaxed. "Please have a seat, Uncle Tang," Gu Ning said, and poured a cup of tea for him. "Uncle Tang, please have a drink." After knowing that Gu Ning was his daughter, Tang Yinfan felt extremely sad when Gu Ning called him her uncle, but he couldn't say anything now. "Uncle Tang, why have you been following my mom these days? Do you think that I approached the Tang family for my own benefit, so you came here to conduct your investigation in person?" Gu Ning asked on purpose. "Of course not." Tang Yinfan denied it at once. "Then why?" Gu Ning asked. "Your behavior could be easily misunderstood. Tang Yinfan, the famous, successful Lord Tang in business, was short of words in front of Gu Ning. Gu Ning didn't urge him. Instead, she remained patient waiting for his answer. Tang Yinfan calmed himself down soon and lied, "I came to City F for business, and I accidentally lived in the apartment across from your home, so I paid a little attention to your family, in case you need my help. After all, my father likes you very much, and even regards you as his own granddaughter, so I absolutely should take your family as my own. Are you sure that the reason Master Tang takes me as his own granddaughter isn't because I'm literally his granddaughter?" Gu Ning asked and smiled. Tang Yinfan rounded his eyes in shock. He didn't expect that Gu Ning already knew. Seeing that, Gu Ning directly laid her cards on the table. "Actually, when Grandpa Tang told me that I closely resembled his second son, he also told me that you disappeared for a year 18 years ago, so I got someone to investigate. Too many coincidences amount to fact, so I'm very sure that you're actually my father. However, my mother thinks that you're already dead, so I haven't told her yet. You don't remember anything about that year after all, and I didn't know your opinions. I didn't want to hurt her feelings." Gu Ning added, "Since you showed up in City F and have followed my mother for a couple of days, I thought that you also accepted the fact and want to have the family reunion." Since Gu Ning had already laid her cards on the table, Tang Yinfan thought it was time to be honest with her. "Yes, I do accept the fact that you're my biological daughter, but I still can't regain my lost memory from that year, so I don't dare meet your mother right now. I know that it's irresponsible, but I still want to regain my memory before I go to meet your mother so that I can treat her with my real feelings. I don't want to hurt her either, and I think that it's better for all of us to maintain the status quo. I agree, but aren't you afraid that my mother might fall in love with another man before you regain your memory? Gu Ning asked. Gu Ning's words made Tang Yunfan think of what he had seen last night, and he panicked a lot. Does your mother has someone she likes now? Seeing Tang Yunfan being so anxious, Gu Ning was satisfied. Not yet, but I plan to help her find a man. She has stayed single for 18 years, and I'm going to go study in the capital in half a year, so I don't want her to be alone any longer. I hoped that there would be a reliable man to look after her, but since you appeared right now, I think that you two are a great match, and I hope that you can get back together. Hearing that, Tang Yunfan relaxed. Do you know why my mother named me Gu Ning? Gu Ning asked. 18 years ago, my mother was still a freshman. She rescued an injured man by accident, but the man lost his memories and wouldn't leave my mother, so my mother called him Ning. Hearing the name, Ning, Tang Yunfan's brain ached a little. He felt a strange emotion, because he had a feeling that Ning was precisely him, but he couldn't remember any details. Gu Ning added, in the beginning, my mother helped him out of kindness, but they fell in love later. Ning was an able man and soon became a supervisor after only half a year in a company. He was then gradually promoted to be the manager of the planning department, but he was lost in a car accident on a business trip later. In that accident, 6 people were lost, including Ning. Hearing the story told by Gu Ning, pieces of memory flashed through Tang Yunfan's mind. He tried to grab them, but failed, and his brain was in great pain. Gu Ning, however, didn't stop, because she wanted to see whether it was useful to stimulate him. Afterwards, my mother found out that she was pregnant and quit school. In the following minutes, Gu Ning told Tang Yunfan about Gu Man's miserable life in the Gu family, and what they had been through during the past 18 years. I'm sorry. I had no idea what you had been through. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Tang Yunfan repeatedly apologized. He was blaming himself. Seeing that Tang Yunfan still couldn't remember anything after the stimulation, Gu Ning stopped telling the story and stood up walking towards him. She gently pressed his temples and put her power into his body. When Tang Yunfan calmed down again, Gu Ning asked, "What do you plan to do next? Do you want to meet my mom right now, or wait until you regain your memory?" The moment Gu Ning finished her sentences and before Tang Yunfan could say a word, her phone rang, and the caller was Mrs. Fu. Mrs. Fu was the owner of a maternal and child supplies store which was next to Kame Beauty Salon. She was also one of their members. Gu Ning had exchanged phone numbers with Mrs. Fu earlier on in case anything bad happened to Gu Qing and Gu Man and they couldn't call her on their own. Therefore, when Gu Ning saw the caller was Mrs. Fu, she had a bad feeling. "Hi, Mrs. Fu. Miss Gu, come here right now. A group of people just damaged your family's store, but I don't know exactly what they did in the store," Mrs. Fu said in great anxiety. "What? Please call the police, and I'll be right there." Gu Ning panicked. "I'll go with you." Tang Yunfan had also heard what Mrs. Fu said on the phone. Gu Ning didn't reject and they ran out together. Tang Yunfan's car was stopped downstairs, so they drove to the shopping mall without delay. On the way, Gu Ning was thinking about who the group of people could be, and she was really worried about Gu Qing and Gu Man. It took around 15 minutes to get there normally, but Tang Yunfan and Gu Ning arrived within 7 minutes. The beauty salon was already in a mess when they finally arrived. Even though the police were here, those who had damaged the store were gone. "Miss, you can't come in here." When Gu Ning walked inside, a policeman stopped her. "I'm the daughter of the owner," Gu Ning said. And then Gu Ning, followed by Tang Yunfan, walked inside. In order to not let Gu Man recognize him, Tang Yinfan put on his mask. There were many injured people in the store, including Gu Qing and Gu Man. Gu Man was the most seriously injured one among them, because her head was bleeding and she had already passed out. The ambulance hadn't arrived yet, so Gu Man could only lie on the sofa. Gu Qing stood by her side but was crying anxiously. Explore Tati stories at no/l/bin.cm. Gu Qing's arm was hit by a steel stick and the other staff were all injured to different degrees. Luckily, they were still alive. Mom, Aunt! Gu Ning ran to them, followed by Tang Yinfan. Seeing Gu Man in danger, Tang Yinfan's heart ached for her, and he was extremely worried that Gu Man would die. Knowing that Tang Yinfan was scared, Gu Ning comforted him. "It'll be fine." Gu Ning wasn't only comforting Tang Yinfan, but also Gu Qing, because Gu Qing kept crying the entire time. Even so, Tang Yinfan was still concerned about Gu Man's life. They were in public, so it wasn't convenient for Gu Ning to put her power into them directly. She then took out the power crystals and told them to take the pills. As for Gu Man, who was the most seriously injured, Gu Ning had to save her life as soon as possible. The other injured people took the pills that Gu Ning gave them without thinking further. After taking the pills, the other injured people soon recovered, and they were all surprised by the great effect of the medicine. However, they were still in the aftermath of the terrible attack. Before long, Gu Man also stopped bleeding and regained her consciousness. Ning Ning! Gu Man hugged Gu Ning tightly in excitement. When she hit her head, she had thought that she would die and would never see Gu Ning again. "Mom, it's fine, and you're fine now," Gu Ning said. Seeing that Gu Man was safe, Tang Yinfan relaxed. After that, Gu Ning asked Gu Qing, "Aunt, what happened?" "I don't really know. When we had just opened the store, a group of people suddenly ran inside with steel sticks in their hands and damaged everything in their sight without saying a word," Gu Qing said. Her voice was still trembling. Obviously, she was very scared. "Have you had any conflict with anyone recently?" Gu Ning asked. "No." Gu Qing and Gu Man said affirmatively. "I heard them say that they're from the Qing gang," the manager said. "The Qing gang?" Hearing that, everyone was shocked. Gu Ning, on the other hand, was displeased. She realized that someone must have hired a bunch of people to damage her family's store, but she didn't know whether they did it because of her or Gu Qing and Gu Man. If they did it aiming to hurt Gu Ning thought that it was probably because she had rescued Siti the other night. The person who had planned to murder Siti was mad at her, so he revenged himself on her using the name of the Qing gang, or the person could be one of the Qing gang too. If they did it aiming to hurt Gu Qing and Gu Man, it could be a business competitor because Kame Beauty Salon was the most popular salon in the area. Especially after the annual event, their membership had dramatically increased, and they had even hired 5 new workers within half a month. Of course, there could be more than those 2 reasons, but Gu Ning thought that they were the most likely. The Qing gang? "I think they must have been hired by someone to damage your store," Tang Yinfan said. In his eyes, he didn't think that the Qing gang would bother to cause a beauty salon trouble unless they were hired by someone. Gu Man didn't notice Tang Yinfan until she heard his voice. "It's you!" She was surprised. Gu Ning was struck dumb for a second, looking at Tang Yinfan for answer. Upstat from n0/v/lbn/.co/m. Tang Yinfan immediately explained. "I saw several hoodlums grab your mother's handbag the other day, and I helped her get it back." Hearing that, Gu Ning understood how her mother got to know Tang Yinfan. "Mom, Aunt, this gentleman is Tang Yinfan," Gu Ning said to Gu Qing and Gu Man. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Tang," Gu Qing and Gu Man said. "Thank you so much for helping me the other day." Gu Man added. You're welcome, Tang Yunfan said. Facing Gu Man, Tang Yunfan didn't seem cold or aloof at all but behaved gently. In fact, he was quite nervous, because he wanted to leave a good impression on Gu Man. At this moment, the ambulance arrived. Although they were all fine now, Gu Ning still told them to go get checked in the hospital. Uncle Tang, would you mind accompanying my mom and aunt to the hospital and bringing them home later? I need to deal with this mess, Gu Ning said. Sure, Tang Yunfan said, but he was worried that Gu Ning couldn't handle it alone, because the Qing gang was involved. Do you need my help here? It's fine. I can handle it, Gu Ning said. If you need me, just call me, Tang Yunfan said with concern. Actually, he should take care of his wife and daughter and help them solve this trouble, but it wasn't the right time for him to do so because his identity hadn't been revealed yet. Thanks, Gu Ning replied. Thank you so much, Mr. Tang, Gu Man said. Afterwards, everyone left, except for Gu Ning. Although the police told Gu Ning that they would catch the gangsters as soon as possible, Gu Ning thought that it would be much faster if she did it herself. When they all left, Gu Ning immediately checked the surveillance cameras and made a copy on the USB flash disk, then she called Chu Xianfeng. Hey, what's up? Chu Xianfeng answered her call within a second. Hi, can we meet? I need your help, Gu Ning said. No problem. Where are you now? Chu Xianfeng agreed without hesitation, since it was Gu Ning who needed his help. His boss liked Gu Ning, and Gu Ning had also rescued his boss once, so he would spare no effort to help her. Gu Ning then told him to meet her right in the beauty salon. Mr. Tang, do you have a cold? Seeing Tang Yunfan wearing a mask all the time, Gu Man asked him with concern. Yeah, and I have allergies so I have to wear a mask, Tang Yunfan lied. 20 minutes later, Chu Xianfeng arrived. Noticing that the beauty salon was in a mess, he was surprised. Who did this? They said that they're from the Qing gang, Gu Ning said. What? Chu Xianfeng was astonished and furious. Who dared to hurt Gu Ning? They're digging their own graves. Chu Xianfeng never doubted Gu Ning's words. Don't worry. I'll find out who it was as soon as possible. I'm not sure whether they're really members of the Qing gang, so please investigate it thoroughly. This is the surveillance video. Saying that, Gu Ning took out the USB flash disk and gave it to Chu Xianfeng. Please just tell me who's behind this when you find out. I want to deal with it myself. Sure, I'll give you the answer today. Chu Xianfeng took the USB flash disk from Gu Ning and promised. Since it was about Gu Ning, he would do his best. Gu Ning closed the door and left. She called Gu Man and asked her whether she was still in the hospital or at home. Gu Man told Gu Ning that she was on her way home, so Gu Ning went directly home. When they were in the parking lot, Gu Man invited Tang Yunfan to have lunch together at her home. Tang Yunfan wanted to join them, but still rejected, because he wasn't willing to expose his identity right now. Tang Yunfan said that he was busy, so Gu Man didn't insist. When Tang Yunfan left, he called Gu Ning and told her that Gu Man and Gu Qing got home safely. Gu Ning asked Tang Yunfan again, do you plan to tell my mom the truth now or are you going to wait until you regain your memory? Tang Yunfan was silent for a while. He knew that it wasn't good to let Gu Man wait, but he was still hesitating over whether to tell her the truth or not right now. I'm afraid that your mother wouldn't accept me after so many years. Gu Ning agreed, and said, I can ask her opinion first, and help her prepare mentally. Great! Tang Yunfan said. When Gu Ning got home, she decided to talk with Gu Man after lunch when Gu Qing was gone. When they were about to eat, Gu Ning received Chu Xuanfeng's call, and she went to her room to answer it. Chu Xinfeng was really efficient, so he already had the result. And he had to be efficient, because it was about Gu Ning. The group of people was indeed from the Qing gang, but they were nobodies in the Qing gang. Chu Xinfeng had gotten control of them, and they told Chu Xinfeng that it was the owner of Meiyan Beauty Salon who had hired them to damage the Kame Beauty Salon. Many VIPs of Meiyan Beauty Salon had abandoned it for Kame Beauty Salon, so the owner of Meiyan hired a group of hoodlums to damage Kame to vent her anger. Up to TED Chapters nnvelben.com. The reason why the owner of Meiyan Beauty Salon dared do that was because her older brother was the director of the Tourism Administration. The director of Tourism Administration was precisely Qin Zheng's father. It seemed that Gu Ning's family couldn't get along with Qin Zheng's family because Gu Ning had been hurt by Qin Zheng and Gu Man had been hurt by Qin Zheng's aunt. "I have them in my hands right now, and you can do whatever you like to them," Chu Xinfeng said. In gangs, a life wasn't worth much, and there were plenty of ways to hide the death. The group of hoodlums had not only damaged Gu Man's store, but had also injured Gu Man and Gu Qing. So they had to pay for what they had done. "I won't bother to kill them, but they'll be disabled for sure." Although Gu Ning was in a rage, she didn't bother to kill them since Gu Man was fine now. "No problem. Whatever you want," Chu Xinfeng said. "I'll meet you after lunch," Gu Ning said. "Sure," Chu Xinfeng replied. Meanwhile, Gu Xiaoxiao's case went to court today. Gu Qingyang and Wen Yulan also showed up with Gu Qingxiang's family, but Gu Qingxiang didn't inform Gu Qing and Gu Man. Coincidentally, the hoodlums dashed into Gu Man's store today. Both Gu Qing and Gu Man were injured as well as scared, so they rested at home. However, when Gu Qingyang called Gu Qing and told her that they were in City F, Gu Qing kindly invited them to have a meal together when they were free. Gu Qing planned to have the meal outside, but Gu Ning thought that it was better to have the meal at home, since they regarded Gu Qingyang's family as relatives now. Normally, they would only invite close friends or relatives to dine at home. Hearing that, Gu Qingyang was touched and relaxed, because he understood that Gu Ning had really forgiven them. In order to not ruin Gu Man's mood, Gu Ning decided not to talk to her about Tang Yunfan for now. Gu Qing and Gu Man were both a little tired, so they took a nap before they went to go grocery shopping. Gu Ning, on the other hand, left to meet Chu Xinfeng. When she was leaving her home, she received Tang Yunfan's call. Tang Yunfan told her that he had to leave for City B, because he had something important to deal with in his company and that he would be back as soon as possible. Gu Ning understood and said, "You've stayed in City F for many days, so you should, of course, go back to your company to deal with your business as the chairman." Tang Yunfan left his business behind and came to City F for Gu Man. He hadn't even gone back for the Lantern Festival, which was enough to show his concern towards Gu Man. Chu Xinfeng told Gu Ning to meet him at the Qing gang's base in City F. She could do whatever she wanted there, and Chu Xinfeng also wanted other members in the Qing gang to remember Gu Ning's face so that such an attack wouldn't happen again. Gu Ning took a taxi heading to the Qinghua Security Company, which was the base of the Qing gang in City F. Members of the Qing gang would work here if they had no tasks to fulfill, because the Qing gang wouldn't support them for free. When Chu Xinfeng went to the gate and welcomed Gu Ning in person, others in the company were all surprised. They were all curious about the girl's identity, because their leader never welcomed ordinary people in person. Chu Xinfeng guided Gu Ning walking to an elevator, and went down to a basement where the group of hoodlums were kept. There were 6 men locked in an iron room. Seeing Chu Xinfeng walking inside, they started to beg him, "Please forgive us this time. We'll never do it again. Please forgive us. Please." Chu Xinfeng didn't say a word, so Gu Ning was obviously the real boss. Seeing those who had injured Gu Qing and Gu Man, Gu Ning was mad. She said coldly, "Do you want us to forgive you? No problem. If you can beat me, you can leave." They had no idea how excellent Gu Ning was at fighting, but Chu Xianfeng did. Even though it seemed like Gu Ning gave them a chance, they actually had no hope to win. The 6 men didn't know who Gu Ning was, but since she dared to give an order in front of Chu Xianfeng, she had to be someone important. They also knew that the girl couldn't be simple, since she dared to challenge them. Nonetheless, they were eager to leave, so they agreed. In fact, even if they disagreed, they had nowhere to hide. "Please open the door and let me in," Gu Ning said to Chu Xianfeng. Chu Xianfeng then opened the door for Gu Ning, and she walked in without hesitation. Seeing Gu Ning coming inside, those men stepped back subconsciously. "Let's begin." Gu Ning stared straight at them. They exchanged a glance at first, then they all ran at Gu Ning. Gu Ning enjoyed beating them for a long time to vent her anger, but she kept them alive. In the following minutes, those men were screaming in pain under Gu Ning's attack. Let alone others outside of the basement, even Chu Xianfeng felt a little frightened. Around 20 minutes later, Gu Ning had had enough and the men were all black and blue. "I'm done. Let's go." Gu Ning walked out directly without giving them a glance. When they were outside, Gu Ning said, "Xianfeng, thank you so much for your help, but I have visitors coming to my home today, so please let me buy you a meal another day." "You don't need to thank me at all. I should say sorry to you instead, and I'd love to meet you for the meal," Chu Xianfeng said. He then gave Gu Ning a USB flash disk and a check of 1,000,000 yuan. "There is evidence on the USB flash disk about this mess, and the check is your compensation." "Thanks, but please take the check back." "I'll make the person who hired them pay me," Gu Ning said with determination. Chu Xianfeng understood that Gu Ning was determined, so he took the check back. Vist and Velben.cm for new updates. "I will also tell all the members in the Qing gang not to bother you anymore, and I promise it won't happen again," Chu Xianfeng said seriously to Gu Ning. "Thanks, bye," Gu Ning said, then left. After Gu Ning was gone, Chu Xianfeng informed everyone in the Qing gang to not assault but protect Gu Ning's companies and those who had a close relationship with her. It wasn't early when Gu Ning separated from Chu Xianfeng, so she decided to go home first and deal with Qin Lilin, who was the owner of Meiyan Beauty Salon, tomorrow. When Gu Ning got home, Gu Man and Gu Qing were about to do grocery shopping. Gu Qinyang and his wife left the court at 4 p.m. Because of Gu Xiaoxiao, Gu Qingxiang and his wife had no mood to treat Gu Qinyang and his wife. Therefore, Gu Qinyang and his wife took a taxi to Gu Qing's home. They knew that Gu Ning was rich, so they weren't surprised when they found out that they lived in Fanghua luxury mansion, but they were still envious of them because Fanghua was a high-end living area. However, they didn't feel jealousy or had animosity towards Gu Ning, because they understood that Gu Ning wasn't someone that they could annoy now. Gu Qinyang and his wife went to a supermarket and bought some fruits and flowers as gifts. Although the gifts weren't expensive, they didn't want to visit Gu Qing and Gu Man with empty hands. After that, they went to Gu Qing's home. They would have dinner at Gu Qing's apartment, so Gu Qing and Gu Man were busy cooking after grocery shopping. Jiang Su was also home earlier today because Gu Qinyang and his wife were going to visit them. When Gu Qinyang and Wen Yulan were approaching Gu Qing's home, they felt quite nervous because there was a clear gap between them, Gu Qing, and Gu Man now. Therefore, they hesitated for a few minutes outside before they rang the doorbell. Jiang Su went to open the door, and Gu Qinyang and his wife greeted him at once. "Hi, brother-in-law." Jiang Su hadn't heard them call him brother-in-law in a long time, because they hadn't shown any respect towards him in the past. Gu Qinyang and his wife also knew it, and felt embarrassed now, facing Jiang Su. Jiang Su, on the other hand, warmly welcomed them like nothing unpleasant had happened before. "Hi, come on in." Gu Qinyang and Wen Yulan then walked inside. They took a glance around the apartment and saw that it was much better than their own place. Gu Qing and Gu Man walked out of the kitchen when they heard Gu Qingyang and his wife's voices. "Welcome! Please have a seat. Have a seat, please. It will take a while before the dishes are on the table. Can I help?" Wen Yulan asked and walked to the kitchen. Wen Yulan didn't act arrogant at all but behaved kindly. "That would be great." Although Gu Qing and Gu Man didn't actually need help, they didn't reject, because it was a good way for them to be reconciled. Gu Qing and Gu Man didn't show any disrespect to Wen Yulan, nor show off in front of her, but kept chatting with her casually. It was the first time that Wen Yulan had felt the warm conversations among relatives, and she felt ashamed for what she had done to Gu Qing and Gu Man before. After a long breath, Wen Yulan apologized with sincerity. "Gu Qing, Gu Man, I'm so sorry for what I did to you before. It's all gone, and we don't need to talk about it anymore." "Exactly, and we're glad that we have a good relationship now." Gu Qing and Gu Man forgave Wen Yulan, and Wen Yulan felt lucky that they were kind enough to forgive her. In the living room, Gu Qinyang was talking with Jiang Su about what had happened in the court today. Gu Xiaoxiao was sentenced to 3 years in jail and her family had to pay 600,000 yuan to Chen Ziao as compensation. Jiang Su sighed after hearing that. Although Gu Qinxiang's family had hurt them deeply, Jiang Su still felt a little sad. At the same time, he also believed that Gu Xiaoxiao had to learn her lesson sooner or later. Before long, Gu Ning and Jiang Xingyue got home. "Hi, uncle." Gu Ning and Jiang Xingyue greeted Gu Qinyang politely. They didn't show any disrespect towards Gu Qinyang, but they weren't close to him either. Although they were relatives, they didn't share many good memories. "Hi, Ning Ning, Xingyue," Gu Qinyang said with a smile. He was still a little embarrassed to see Gu Ning, but seeing that Gu Ning was being kind he relaxed. New chapters will be fully updated at novl/bin.com. Thinking of the news about the opening ceremony of Jade Beauty Jewelry, Gu Qinyang couldn't help admiring Gu Ning because almost half of the important figures in City G had attended it. To his astonishment, Gu Ning was able to know those figures. That being the case, he didn't dare to annoy her. Dishes were soon placed on the table. "Dinner's ready," Gu Qing said. "Let's have dinner," Jiang Su said and guided Gu Qinyang to the dining room, followed by Gu Ning and Jiang Xingyue. When Wen Yulan saw Gu Ning, she felt embarrassed too, but she still greeted them politely. "Hi, Ning Ning, Xingyue." "Hi, Aunt," Gu Ning and Jiang Xingyue replied, but they didn't show much affection. Seeing that Gu Ning was being nice, Wen Yulan relaxed too. After that, they all sat down around the table. "Qinyang, let's have some alcohol together. It's a new year after all," Jiang Su said. Jiang Su wasn't an alcohol lover, and he never drank when he was alone, unless it was the New Year festival or the Lantern Festival. Since Gu Qinyang was here today, he would love to have some. "Why not?" Gu Qinyang agreed. Jiang Su then took out a bottle from his alcohol cabinet. It was Mao Tai that was made 30 years ago. It was 500 milliliters with 53% alcohol and cost over 4,000 yuan. Gu Qinyang couldn't afford such an expensive brand of baijiu, but he had heard a lot about it. Seeing the Mao Tai which cost over 4,000 yuan a bottle, Gu Qinyang hesitated to drink it, because only a small cup of it might cost several hundred yuan. He couldn't afford such expensive alcohol throughout his whole life. Even Gu Qingxiang, who had been the richest one in their family, couldn't afford it either. Gu Qingxiang could only afford alcohol which cost around 2,000 yuan. During this meal, except Gu Qinyang and Wen Yulan who felt uneasy, the rest enjoyed themselves. After dinner, they were chatting in the living room, and Gu Qinyang took out 2 red envelopes, giving them to Gu Ning and Jiang Xingyue. "These are for you two girls. There isn't much money inside, but we both wish you Happy New Year. 1,000 yuan was a lot for Gu Ning in the past, but it was nothing in her eyes now. Thank you, uncle. Gu Ning and Jiang Xinyue didn't show any disdain. Seeing that, Gu Qingying relaxed. Gu Man and Gu Qing also prepared 2 red envelopes for Gu Qingshi and Gu Yining. When Yulan took them on behalf of her children. There wasn't much money in the red envelopes that Gu Qing and Gu Man prepared for Gu Qingshi and Gu Yining either, because it was just a form of good wishes. When it was almost 9 p.m., Gu Qingying and when Yulan left. Gu Qing and Gu Man invited them to stay at their home, but Gu Qingying and Wen Yulan insisted on staying in the hotel. Jiang Su then drove them to the hotel. After Gu Qingying and his wife were gone, Gu Ning went back to her home, but Gu Man didn't go home until she had chatted with Gu Qing for a while longer. Ning, your uncle's family has surprisingly changed. We're relatives after all, and let bygones be bygones. If they need help in the future, are you willing to give them a helping hand for my sake? Gu Man asked Gu Ning the moment she got home. Mom, don't worry. I will, Gu Ning said. Otherwise, she wouldn't have proposed to invite them to dine at their home. Great! Gu Man was relieved. It was late when they both got home, so Gu Ning put off telling Gu Man about Tang Yinfan in case Gu Man couldn't sleep tonight. When Gu Ning was in her room, she called Leng Xiaoting and told him about Tang Yinfan. She wouldn't hide it from him. Leng Xiaoting also hoped that Gu Ning could have a happy family, and Tang Yinfan could be a good father as well as husband. Most importantly, since Tang Yinfan had fallen in love with Gu Man before, it would be easier for them to get back together. Ning, I've been getting busy recently, so I probably won't have much time to call you. I'll come to meet you once I'm free, Leng Xiaoting said. I'll miss you, Gu Ning said. Me too. Take good care of yourself, Leng Xiaoting said with concern. I will, and you have to take good care of yourself too. Gu Ning said. The next morning, Gu Qing and Gu Man were about to clear the mess left in the store, but were stopped by Gu Ning. Gu Ning planned to get the compensation from the person who had hired the bunch of hoodlums to damage their store first, and then open their store again. Both Gu Qing and Gu Man completely trusted Gu Ning, so they agreed. After lunch, Gu Ning pulled Gu Man to sit on the sofa. Mom, I have something serious to talk to you about. What is it? Seeing Gu Ning being so serious, Gu Man was anxious. Well, it's about my biological father, Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Gu Man's body abruptly stiffened for a second and she looked upset. What happened? Do you still remember that I told you that my biological father could be alive? That he lost his memory when you met him, so after the car accident, it is possible that he regained his memories but lost the memory of the year when you were together. If he's still alive, but just forgot what happened during the year when he was with you, if he's not married yet, if he still loves you, if you still have a chance to meet each other again, would you give it a try? Gu Ning asked Gu Man again. Gu Man was shocked, but she knew that Gu Ning asked her for a reason, and it was really possible that Ning was still alive. 1. Baijiu is a category of Chinese alcohol made from grain. Gu Man started to tremble a little with tears in her eyes. Are you sure that he's still alive but just forgot the year we were together? I met an old man the other day and he told me that I closely resembled his son. He also told me that his son disappeared for a year 18 years ago, and when his son came back, his son had completely changed but lost his memory of the year he was gone. I thought that it couldn't just be a coincidence, so I did my investigation, Gu Ning said. What's the result? Gu Man asked in anxiety. Although we haven't done a DNA test yet, I'm sure that he's my biological father, Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Gu Man burst into tears and breathed hard. Gu Ning immediately put her power into Gu Man's body to help her calm down. Does he have his own family now? Gu Man asked. She believed that he must be married and have children by now. No, he doesn't, Gu Ning said. What? Gu Man was astonished. Although he lost his memory, he had a strange feeling in his mind and refused to get married, Gu Ning said. Gu Man remained silent, thinking back to the past. She had a deep and abiding love for Ning, which was the reason she never got married again. However, they hadn't seen each other for 18 years, so she honestly had no idea how to face him again. What's your opinion? Gu Man asked Gu Ning. If Gu Ning wanted a happy family, Gu Man would do it for her, but if Gu Ning didn't want to change their life now, Gu Man would also agree. After all, Gu Ning was the most important person in Gu Man's life, and Gu Man wouldn't hurt Gu Ning just for a man, even though she had loved the man very deeply. Although the man was her daughter's father, he had been absent for the past 18 years. During the past 18 years, they had lived a good life without him anyway. Gu Ning understood that Gu Man wanted to meet him but was worried about her feelings. Mom, you've stayed alone for my sake for so many years. You don't feel very lonely because I've been with you the entire time, but I'm going to attend my university soon. I don't want you to be alone at home, so I think that it's better if there is a reliable man to keep your company. I've always had that idea in my mind even before I found out that my biological father is still alive. Mom, actually, I've already met him and he's a good man. Gu Ning held Gu Man's hand. Knowing that, Gu Man was deeply touched. However, if he lost the memory of that year, will he accept me? Gu Man asked. He will. He's just afraid that you won't accept him, who already forgot you, Gu Ning said seriously. Hearing that, Gu Man rounded her eyes in shock. He knows about our existence? At the same time, she was a little displeased. If the man knew about their existence, why didn't he come to meet them? Gu Man wasn't sure whether she should meet him, but she cared about the man's attitude too. Gu Ning understood what was on Gu Man's mind. In fact, he is Tang Yun fan. He just found out a couple of days ago too, and he's worried that you won't accept him, so he was wearing a mask secretly staring at you these past few days, Gu Ning said. What? Gu Man was totally shocked. Ning is Tang Yun fan? She had been robbed the other day, and he had suddenly showed up to help her. She had had the feeling that they must have met before, but she was surprised that he was Ning. Gu Man was so astonished that she had no idea how to react to the shocking news now. I need some time, Gu Man said, walking to her bedroom. Gu Ning didn't force her either, and let her have a rest, while she went out to deal with Qin Lilin. Gu Ning didn't go to Meiyan Beauty Salon, but the police station. Coincidentally, when Gu Ning arrived at the police station, she met Yuan Jisung, who had just walked out of it. Hi, girl Gu, what happened that you came here? Yuan Jisung was surprised to see Gu Ning. People came to the police station for a reason, so Yuan Jisung was concerned about her. Nice to meet you, Mr. Yuan. Gu Ning greeted him with respect. Well, someone hired a group of hoodlums to damage my mother's beauty salon yesterday, so I came here with the evidence. What? How dare they? Come on, I can take you to meet the director. Yuan Jisung said. Thank you so much, Mr. Yuan. Since Yuan Jisung was willing to help her, it would be much better. You can call me Uncle Yuan, Yuan Jisung said. Gu Ning had saved his life and Su Anya's life, so he appreciated Gu Ning very much and would love to make friends with her. Gu Ning really was an outstanding young girl. Read latest OVLS at nv/e/l/buy.com. Sure, Uncle Yuan, Gu Ning said. It was a good thing that she could maintain a good relationship with Yuan Jisung. Oh, hi, can I help, Mr. Yuan? Liang Yobua, who was the director of the Public Security Bureau, was a little confused when Yuan Jisung walked back in. And when he noticed Gu Ning, who was walking behind Yuan Jisung, he was surprised. "Miss Gu!" When Gu Ning had been arrested last time because she had beaten several female students in a school, Liang Yobua had directly received his leader's call and ordered to release her. Therefore, Gu Ning had left a deep impression on him. Liang Yobua had even remembered Gu Ning's face in his mind, because he didn't dare annoy her again. Although Gu Ning was from an ordinary family, she had support from powerful people. In addition, ever since Liang Yobua had met Gu Ning at Su Anya's birthday party, he knew that she wasn't simple and she had a powerful network. In that case, Liang Yobua treated Gu Ning with great respect. "Director Liang, nice to meet you. The thing is, a group of hoodlums damaged and smashed my mother's beauty salon yesterday, and this is the evidence," Gu Ning said and took out the USB flash disk, handing it to Liang Yobua. Hearing that, Liang Yobua took the USB flash disk at once and watched the evidence first. There were surveillance videos on the USB flash disk. After watching the videos, both Liang Yobua and Yuan Jisung were mad because Qin Lilin had hired a bunch of hoodlums to damage Gu Ning's mother's store because of business competition. "Girl Gu, how is your mother now?" Yuan Jisung asked with concern. "She was seriously injured, but luckily I had my special medicine, and she was much better after taking the pills. If I hadn't taken the medicine with me, my mother would have been in great danger," Gu Ning said seriously. They both knew that Gu Ning had a special medicine, so they didn't doubt her words. And they also noticed that Gu Man's head was bleeding after the heavy hit in the videos. The head was the most fragile part of the human body, and it was likely to cause death after such a heavy hit. "Miss Gu, I promise that I'll handle this case in person," Liang Yobua said to Gu Ning, and he was determined to punish Qin Lilin severely. "Thank you so much, Director Liang," Gu Ning said politely. "My pleasure," Liang Yobua replied. After that, Gu Ning left for her home. Once Gu Ning was gone, Liang Yobua gave the order to arrest Qin Lilin. Qin Lilin thought that her plan had succeeded, but the police suddenly came to her store and arrested her without further questioning. "What are you doing?" "I'm the younger sister of the director of the tourism administration." "You can't arrest me," Qin Lilin shouted. "The director of the tourism administration? Even the mayor can't help you now, because Secretary Yuan has given the order to punish you according to the law." A policeman sneered. "What?" Hearing that, Qin Lilin was shocked. It was beyond her imagination that Secretary Yuan would be involved, because from her investigation she read that Gu Qing and Gu Man were ordinary people. Before long, the news that Qin Lilin had hired hoodlums to damage Kame Beauty Salon went abroad, and the owners of different stores in the shopping mall were all surprised. In the beginning, they all believed that Kame Beauty Salon had annoyed the gang, but unexpectedly, it was simply business competition. Facing solid proof, Qin Lilin wasn't able to deny it. Therefore she would be brought to court tomorrow. When Gu Ning got home, Gu Man was already awake, sitting on the sofa thinking about Tang Yunfan. Gu Ning was patient. She wouldn't force her mother to make the decision right now. "Mom, I found the person who hired those hoodlums to damage our store," Gu Ning said to Gu Man. "Who?" Gu Man turned to Gu Ning. I follow US stories at nvl/by/n.com. It's the owner of Mayenne Beauty Salon. She was jealous of us, so she hired hoodlums to smash our store. Luckily, she was arrested today and will be sentenced tomorrow, Gu Ning said. Hearing the reason, Gu Man sighed. It seemed that running a popular store wasn't a good thing. After a while of silence, Gu Man opened her mouth wanting to say something, but didn't say it aloud. Seeing that, Gu Ning directly asked her, "Mom, what do you want to say?" "Just tell me." "Forget it." Gu Man gave up. Since Gu Man didn't want to say it, Gu Ning didn't insist. When Gu Qing came to visit them that afternoon, Gu Man told Gu Qing about what Qin Lilin had done. Hearing that Qin Lilin had already been arrested by the police, Gu Qing was relieved. During dinner, Gu Man ate less than usual because she didn't have much of an appetite. In the night, Gu Man finally asked Gu Ning, where does he live? He was, of course, Tang Yinfan. He lives in City B, Gu Ning said. Actually, Master Tang already took me as his own granddaughter, but he doesn't know that Tang Yinfan is my biological father yet. I think that maybe it's fate that brought us together. Even though you didn't meet him, we still have a connection with the Tang family. Indeed, after Tang Haifeng officially took Gu Ning as his own granddaughter, Gu Man would have met the Tang family sooner or later. Although Gu Ning respected Gu Man's opinion and decision, she would also help her mother to face it. What? Master Tang already took you as his own granddaughter? Gu Man was surprised. Yes. I went to the Tang family's house and he saw me there, Gu Ning said. He was, of course, Tang Yinfan. Well, Gu Man didn't know what to say. In that case, Gu Man would have to meet the Tang family sooner or later. What is his family like? Gu Man asked. Gu Man knew that it was always hard for in-laws to get along with each other. Master Tang's wife passed away many years ago, and they only had a daughter and 2 sons. The older son works in politics, while the younger son is Tang Yinfan, who is a businessman. They're all very nice and kind to me, Gu Ning said. Gu Man, however, was silent again. The next afternoon, Gu Ning received Muku's call. Boss, why didn't you tell me what had happened to your store? How is your mother right now? Muku complained once Gu Ning answered his call. My mom is fine now. How did you get to know about it? Gu Ning asked with curiosity. Ha ha. Muku laughed, then said with obvious disdain, Qin Jing told me, because he turned to me after his aunt was arrested by the police. He wanted me to help him beg you. Is he crazy or something? How is it possible that I'd help him? Muku was furious saying that. Well, that's all for this part, trekkers. See you all in the next video.